Welcome, everyone. It is 5:15 on Wednesday, January 27th, 2021, and the Carroll City Council meeting will now commence. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First, everyone's in attendance, except Councilman Fleshner will probably be here shortly. The first item on the agenda this evening is under reports, and it is the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget work session. And we had some preliminary budget changes, and I'll have Laura start with those first, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. After our first couple sessions, a couple items or three items listed on here came to our attention that we wanted to point out to council. And number one is the airport miscellaneous revenues that had been identified and asked about in their miscellaneous revenues, why it was $15,000, where historically it had not been. In conversations with the airport commission secretary, that amount should have been $500 and not $15,000. So we will get that corrected in the budget document. It does affect our ending balance in the general fund just slightly, but ever so slightly, going from a projected 26.3% of reserves, or the reserves being 26.3% of the revenue down to 26.17. So just a slight adjustment there.
And I'll interject real quick too right here, just to correct something. There was a discussion at the last meeting about the airport grant for the runway LED lights. Just to clarify, that is a 90-10 grant. Just some of the information I got, I looked at it incorrectly, but it is a 90-10 grant.
That's better than the 80-20 then. So I think most of the grants that we've gotten for the airport were 90-10. So
There have been various levels, but that's the
Okay.
typical, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Item number two on here is for a rec center building project. After the first meeting, council had looked at various options for funding a project, and what we gathered from that, if council wants to begin doing some design services for our project, staff would propose allocating some funds from the local option sales tax. In the information that had originally been prepared and sent out with the budget book, it showed $1 million from local option sales tax going towards the project overall, and that was allocated in fiscal 23. If we want to get started with the project and doing some design services, we would recommend looking at a split of that $1 million coming over the fiscal years 21, 22, and 23, where design services could start in fiscal 21. Our rough estimate, we don't have obviously a contract or anything that we've entered into with a firm yet, but we have an estimate of where we think maybe they could go. We would propose putting $260,000 in fiscal 21, $260,000 in fiscal 22, and then the remainder of that $1 million would be then in fiscal 23. Updated local option sales tax summary accounting of that fund was included with this memo. And so you can see that change has been shown there by splitting out that $1 million.
So the plan would be to deplete that, not to replenish at that point. Is that the way it's presented?
It would be, I'm sorry.
To deplete that $1 million on
Yes.
expenses and not to replenish it?
Yes.
Or keep a balance there?
Yes. Yep. The plan, the way the funding had been proposed was $1 million goes towards the project. So it could be spent towards anything in that project, you know, from the design to the construction. And so to get the ball rolling, if you want to do design services, we'd say, let's start by using this local option sales tax money.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that, but if we're moving forward with the project too, I wouldn't mind if there was money going in to backfill that and keeping the balance growing. So that way when we actually get to the final ticket, it's a little bit lower sticker shock.
And there certainly is. I mean, if you're looking at the local option sales tax, there is some additional room if the city wanted to use less local option sales tax or not do any of the geo bond. I mean, we could spend down some additional local option sales tax dollars for that. So there is some flexibility there. So I would say there's roughly up to $500,000 that could be spent during the window of the construction.
So that was number two listed in the memo.
Oh.
Any other questions?
When do you plan on bringing that to council for a vote to go forward or not?
We haven't formally started having any discussions with RDG at this point about a proposal. So I would say it would be probably 30 days out before we bring a proposal to council to begin the design services. I would say that is probably a 9-month process to go through the design process. So to be in a position where we're going to let the project bid it and start construction for spring, we're going to want to start that process sooner rather than later.
So the public needs to know 30 days from now, we're going to make a yes or no on going forward with this project.
That would be my guesstimate. And really, once you do the design services, once you start that, the city's really committed to the project at that point. I mean, that's $500,000 in design that we don't want to do if the project's not going forward.
So we've basically got 30 days to get feedback from the public how they feel about this.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions on that, the rec center bullet point here? Okay. Then the third one is for funding for the Timberline Road Sidewalk Design Services that council had passed with the design services contract at the council meeting on Monday. The portion that related to the Timberline Road Sidewalk was roughly $7,500. So staff would recommend taking that money from the local option sales tax funding. And so it would be in the budget, it would show as a transfer from local option sales tax to the CP Streets Capital Projects Fund to fund that portion of it. So those were the 3 items we had identified so far based upon the 2 work sessions that we've had. Obviously tonight, we've got a number of items to go through yet today. And then if there's any other comments, thoughts, changes council wants to do, we'd like to have that conversation tonight.
Additionally, just on the Timberline Drive, we would anticipate the actual construction would also come out of local option sales tax. We just haven't identified the cost of that project yet.
Any other questions or anything? Well, this will come back up again because this all has to be incorporated in, so. Thanks, Laura. Jack, are you ready?
I am.
We'll get started with Parks and Recs, and Jack, you're up.
All right, Parks and Rec, we'll start with tab E, page 45. We'll go 45 through 56. Give everyone a
Thank you
second
for
to get
joining.
there.
The Carroll City Council meeting will begin at 5.
You need to see that computer.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened.
Sorry, Jack, just a
No
second.
problem.
Okay.
Should be good.
Yep.
Okay, our revenue main source is rentals, shelter house rentals. We might get a few dollars when people rent the stadium and do other things, donations for projects. So revenue for parks is not usually, $6,000. That's a good year. Personnel costs, 3% raise for full-time staff, insurance. Some of those things will bring that price up a little bit. The 2 areas that have significantly dropped are services and commodities and capital outlay. Services and commodities, the 2 things that we've had in the current budget, we have Emerald Ash Borer at $176,000. We'll have that money available. We've started spending it on phase 1 and phase 2 of the Emerald Ash Borer. We still have a little work at the cemetery with one of the contractors, but basically phase 1 and 2 are done. And we'll look at phase 3 this fall. We won't get a project in before they'll have to stop for the summer anyway. So it'll be a fall winter project. We'll have that money available, so we'll carry that over, and an additional $25,000 for fiscal 22. So that's really the big difference there. And then under buildings and grounds, $76,100, we dropped to $34,100. That is the wall at the adult softball fields. If you're look the wall behind the seats, the bleachers on field 2, that's Bowen. It's needs to be taken out, redone. It's just one of those projects that has needed some attention. So we will work on that probably this spring, summer, get that bowed back and get it reinforced so we don't lose the wall there. So that's really the two big things under services and commodities. And then under capital, really, it's just a matter of what projects we want to do this year. In the current budget, we had the truck, the mowers, trailers, skid loader. We just purchased the skid loader at $60,000. And then next year, we really have two items that we're buying. Is a garden tractor. We use that when we do the fields out of baseball, softball, and it's an extra mower that we can use. It's really a utility tractor. It goes and does when the other mowers are out using and we need that tractor to do some work. That's one we use. Then a 100-inch mower, we want to use that out at the soccer fields, out at the baseball, softball fields out north. That'll be a new piece of equipment that we'll add to our list of inventory. And then just a tiller. We need it. Our tiller, it was going to cost more to fix it than buy a new one. So we are getting that. So really, when you have your capital items, we had a big year this year, and next year we'll just have a lot less things to purchase because we bought them this year.
I'll make a note on that 100-inch mower. I think that's going to be a big efficiency gain for us. I think when you can put one person on a 100-inch mower versus a 72-inch mower, we're going to see some good productivity changes. So
72 to 100, that's 30%. So
should make a big difference. I've run a 100-inch plus mower. They cover a lot of ground quick.
Yeah.
Glad to see that.
Good. So, and then we touch base on staffing is pretty much equivalent to 1.84 hours. Typically have 2 to 3 people helping us mow and pick up those areas where they don't get to in the summer. But anymore, these part-time positions are 36 weeks. We like to have 32 hours. But vacations and people just want more time off. So we do struggle getting 3 people to commit to 32 hours a week. We had budgeted in the past for that, but realistically, we're not seeing that. And bringing on a 4th person just doesn't really make sense. It makes sense to keep those 3, get as many hours as we can, and we're able to pick up some of that other stuff. So, any questions with the parks? Okay. Next would be the golf course. Golf course, actually revenue with last year revenue was real good. One area that early on that we made as a staff decision was golf carts. If there's 2 people playing together, we made them ride separate carts. We didn't increase the fee for them. It would be $20, 10 each to ride the golf cart. When it was an individual person, we didn't charge each one $20 on the golf carts. We still just charged them the 10 because we felt this is a unique situation, and we kind of made that decision with everything else that was going on. The golf course had opened up and people were using it. We wanted to make sure we tried to get as much people that experience out there at the golf course. That was one of the things that we kind of lost a little bit of revenue on that we would have normally received. It was, again, just a great year for the golf course. Memberships was down a few, but overall, real good season. So expenses, a little increase. Pretty much the expenses is typical for the golf course. The personnel, superintendent, assistant superintendent, 25% of my salary, and the part-time seasonal adds out to 5 full-time employees. We typically run 6 or 7 people. We have 1 or 2 that maybe just do 16 hours a week. We have others that do 40 through the summer. Again, those are usually 32 to 36 week employees, 9 months, 8 to 9 months. But really the big factor is your weather in the fall. If you have a good warm season, people are golfing in September, October, we need those people to keep mowing and keep those things going. So, and that really helps Scott and Jeremy do other things in the fall that they normally don't do regular season. Get some of the pesticides, some of the fertilizing, and some of those things down. So they are able to focus on those things when normally they can help with the mowing and some of those things. So capital items would be next year is our utility cart, hybrid mower, out front mower, and the irrigation pump system. And I just want to touch base a little bit on the irrigation system. This is something we really committed to in 2019. We were anticipating about a $275,000 project, the pump station at $175,000, and the irrigation system at $100,000. So we have the money to do those things. But after looking into it more, what we would like to do, so we were they're gonna go to the pump station, take off the roof, take the guts out. They can't fit through the door. They need to get it out another way. So they're gonna take this roof off, pull the system out. It'll be pieced a little bit, but take it off, put in a new system. And for the 275, we're gonna go to the 480 sprinkler heads that are on the course and replace a component on the sprinkler head. And that was the $275,000. On hindsight, talking to more people that have more experience and that understand this, and Scott agreeing that this was a good decision, we're talking about replacing the whole head now instead of just the one component. Replace the whole head, the whole sprinkler system. If we do that, that's going to be about another $120,000. So in the next few weeks, we'll have some research and do that. Right now, we have money, and what we're probably going to do is the pump house. Take the roof off, do the guts, and replace that. And then we'll have another discussion if we want to add the money to the budget for maybe next year or the following year to replace the whole sprinkler system, the head part. From the pump to the heads is fine. We don't need to do anything with this. This is a 20-year-old system. Our research was it's put in 2001, between 2000 and 2001. So it's time to definitely replace the guts. We're seeing some issues. I know Scott had some issues last year with it. So we have the money. We will do this in the fall and then look at the sprinkler heads.
Will the heads make it more efficient? Will we use less water?
I think the system and that, the nice thing is if we need to do some work on hole one, we have a couple of them that aren't working well, we can shut down those sprinkler heads. We don't have to shut down the whole unit. Right now, the unit runs every sprinkler, all 480 at the same time, where he can zone it and specifically do something different. And it's going to be easier to repair those sprinkler heads when there is problems. Usually, if you have a sprinkler head, 2 or 3 of them in May, you don't shut down the whole system. You wait till the end of the year and then replace them. Where this will be a lot easier for them to jump in and replace things as the year goes.
Do you participate in doing some zone watering rather than having to turn the entire system on, just watering certain spots at certain times?
Yeah, I think he could do some of that, not to the effect of what this will be. Yeah, this will be nice if.
No, I mean with the new system, is that the anticipation, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah. I could see big gains there potentially.
Right.
Jack, you got any more left on that, or
No.
I want to know your definition of a hybrid mower. I don't know what that is for sure.
I'm not 100% sure on that either, Scott. That's how he said it. I guess I'm not 100%. I can find out.
I'd like to know that. I assume he means one of the new electric powered mowers is what he's talking about.
Okay.
Which the technology's come a long ways in the last few years and is looking like pretty good stuff for potential for municipals.
Okay. Yeah. I know he's trying to save on gas and do some of those things.
Yeah.
So that was my understanding is it would save gas. I don't know if it's electric, part gas.
I don't know either. I'd like to know what he's got in mind.
Okay.
Just curiosity.
Sure.
Got a question on the 72-inch mower.
Yep.
Now, on the previous thing, you went to 100-inch mower. Is there a reason why we want to go to 100-inch here?
Yeah, you want a combination. Can I take that one for you, Jack?
I guess I missed just a part of
I got listed
that.
here for next year, 72 out front more.
Yep.
In the previous thing you just talked about, you went to 100-inch more.
Different areas. It'd be 72 will fit, most of our areas, but 100-inch, just a little bit wider and is not used. 72-inch can get most every area where you lose that a little bit with 100-inch. You need a variety of different size mowers.
The 72 is our staple. It's our mainstay
Yeah.
right now.
Parks.
The 84, right? 84 or 72?
No, 72.
The 72 is our mainstay. And I would look for that to evolve and get wider as times move on, but this is the forefront of it, that 100-inch. Now, we do have 100 out there, or 100 plus out there now.
Yeah.
Golf course.
Fairway, yeah.
Fairway more. But no, you've got another one too, don't you? There's a rough cut.
There's a rough cut and a fairway, yeah.
And those wide areas, they were just super ball fields, the likes of that. But for a little finer work and more different areas, there'll be a mix, but I think it'll get bigger as it goes by.
You got areas with a lot of trees that are close together, that 100-inch won't get in there. And, typically we've had historically 72-inch mowers. But as I mentioned earlier, staffing sometimes becomes a problem. Now you have as many hours, so you want to get that extra 30% done with that person on the mower. You just need a variety because it's not the exact, all fields aren't
You're basically replacing the 72-inch that you've got there is what you're saying.
Yes,
And you have hundreds out there.
yes.
Okay.
It's good evolution.
Yeah, I get it.
Golf course, anything else? Clubhouse, there's not many repairs that we need to do out there. It's been good. One thing down the road is the parking lot. We'll need to address that with an asphalt overlay down the road in the next 3 or 4 years.
All the letters staying on the building.
And that's one of the things under repair and maintenance. We have money to take those letters down and redo it. I don't know why that, the L fell off several times and now it's the A, I think. And I don't have a good answer. Down at the cemetery, not one of those have fallen off. Same style. So I don't know why those are staying on. I think we need, what our plan is, what Andy works with that, is remove some of the siding, reinforce behind there, and actually put the studs or the screws into the wood. So we're working on that.
Mike would like they'll sleep a little bit later in the mornings.
What's that?
It's kind of an inside joke.
So with that asphalt overlay, is that something that you'll coordinate with Randy to try to get done when you have
Yes.
someone in town doing it?
When the asphalt guys are absolutely, that is ideal. And we'll get better prices and work with that. Absolutely.
And we don't have an asphalt project this year. So it's a
Yeah.
concrete project this year.
Okay.
That's why I was wondering if we had other asphalt stuff that we were doing anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any that we have right now other than just asphalt that we use for patching.
You said in the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Not like it's next year.
But it may be a future, if it's
Yeah.
not this
Hmm.
calendar year.
Maybe when Randy has an asphalt street project, then
Good thing to line up.
incorporate that together. That way it's all one big project instead of little.
And obviously the big thing right now is the irrigation system for us and the pump house. We're gonna have that done. Then that might be the next project. I know our parks and golf, right now they put a lot of their equipment down at Grant Park Shelter House during the winter months. There is a need for an additional cold building out there that they can store some stuff at the golf course. And even the parks garage, the equipment keeps getting bigger. When you get 100-inch mowers compared to 72, if you ever get a chance, I encourage you to go out to the golf course garage and what he works in. It is a tight quarters. So we need to look down the road. That would be another golf course plan that the superintendent would really like to get on the radar and look at. I should say it's been on the radar, just hasn't been funded yet because we've had other priorities and other needs.
Might be a shared facility between the two then?
Yep.
I say we should be picking up some capacity with the new street maintenance facility, right? The old building.
Okay. Anything with else with the golf course? All right, the Carroll Recreation Center. All right, revenue obviously was down. Memberships, when we refunded people back in March, April, May, we had some revenue lost there. But in memberships are staying steady. We had a drop off in memberships, steadily dropped off until November, December. I'd say it's steady, maybe a few more losses. You know, I just saw one today, family not using it. But typically you do have that when you raise rates, you get that wakes, reminds people, you know what, I did a payment and I haven't used it in 6 months. I'm just going to cancel it now. So as much as we enjoy, or we don't enjoy it, but the need to raise rates, you're going to lose a few each time. It's usually about 5 to 10 memberships we lose when we raise rates. So that easily could have been one of the components on why we lost a couple of those memberships. Rec Center expenses, we had personnel costs. We re-estimated it down from the original 2021 budget because we had kept the recreation superintendent position open. We didn't fill that, so we were able to take the 6 months and reduce that. And the other thing we're doing now is our part-time nighttime cleaning came out of the part-time staff. We're now they're contracted, so it's actually a wash where we're moving that money over to contract services, and we'll pay them that way rather. And the one thing is you don't have insurance and some of those other costs when you do the contract. You do, I'm sure the company figures that in when they give us the bid, but you don't see that directly on the line items that we have. So that was really the big thing. Services and commodities very similar to what it was. And the capital outlay, we're not taking any of the rec center projects out of the capital. So that's why you see the reduction from $896,000 to $729,000. Authorized personnel, rec superintendent, and Mike and I are talking on a regular basis on how we want to proceed. We might do things a little bit different with the rec superintendent, try to find maybe some of those areas where the rec center needs some additional help, some additional resources, marketing, work on memberships, some of those things that maybe we haven't utilized that rec superintendent position for before. So those are things that we're really considering to move forward with the rec superintendent. Municipal service worker, that is Bob, works in the mornings, part of my salary, 30%. Andy is a third, fitness aquatic specialist. So Jess is 70%, and then our part-time patrol, lifeguards, and the cleaning. So those are, the staff that we have down at the rec center. So overall, it comes out to be approximately about 10.72 full-time staff down there.
Jerick, are you looking at hiring another lifeguard, part-time lifeguard, or just more hours? Since there's an $800 bump in there.
More hours. I'm sorry.
So part-time lifeguards, you're going from 275 to 314. Looks like about 800 hours more.
Right.
We were closed for 2 months.
We were closed for 2 months. That's why we had dropped it.
Oh, gotcha.
Then we came back with pretty much you have. Actually, I'll have it right. Oh, sorry. I can tell you, detail that sheet out. So pool, you have basically 90 hours a week that the indoor pool is open. A lot of times you have 2 guards, and then we do that for 40 weeks. So that's approximately about 3,600 hours of lifeguards. And then during the summer, it's a little bit different because we have different hours. We're open more hours. We kind of open at 10 and we stay open. So we budget for 12 weeks, 125 hours a week. So we have roughly about 5,800 hours of lifeguarding. That's how we try to figure that out. And then we start having parties and some of the other, when swim team has a swim meet, we're usually there earlier in the morning for them. There's some other odd hours, pool parties if Denison Job Corps comes in, those are hours outside of those normal hours. So we add some additional hours to cover those. And a lot of times those are paid at time and a half because they're later in the evenings or past 7 or early mornings. So we try to pay them time and a half to incentivize them to come in and do those extra duties.
What was the personal services? What was it estimated at last year before COVID? What was the number?
I looked at that too.
It would have been,
I just want to compare it to 448.
It was close-ish.
current budget for personnel services at the rec center was $437,000.
Okay, so that makes it 448 understandable. All right.
And 448 up just a little bit. So again, current, 165,000 for part-time. And when we're closed, the control desk, all those different areas were closed for almost 2 months.
And then Joel being gone.
No, that would have been full-time though. His was full-time.
I'm talking personal expenses.
Overall, yeah. And I'm just narrowing more with just the part-time. So we re-estimated that number down because of COVID. And we were closed. We didn't have the hours. But Joel is, probably 35,000. Insurance would add to that number, and the part-time when we were closed.
These are summaries, and I love these summaries. Let's be clear, staff. But I would like you to consider in your own talks the possibility of having that column of the original budget.
I thought that today. Yeah.
Several times just this year with COVID changing our budget so much, I want to look for that. Then I flip to the back, back and forth. It may not be an issue, but just talk it over.
And you have a position's not filled for 6 months, that's 30, 40,000. Again, last year, we originally budgeted for another full-time municipal service worker in the parks. Well, we ended up doing that, so we cut that out. So,
yeah, definitely estimate's important.
Yep.
But,
and I guess I'll take this opportunity because I was going to interject before Jack left the rec center because we talked a little bit about memberships going down. We spent a lot of time looking at memberships in the rec center because it was a big hit. I mean, you go back and look at fiscal year 19, which would have been prior to COVID. Fiscal year 20, we took a hit. We're estimating, this fiscal year being about 310,000. Well, that's 30% off of fiscal year 19. That's even 20% off fiscal year 20. And that would have been a period that we're actually closed for a period of time. And then you look at fiscal year 22, we're still down 21.5% compared to fiscal year 19 and about 10% compared to fiscal year 20. So, there's going to be some long legs with COVID, I think, at the rec center. It's going to take some time.
What was the estimate again before COVID-19 on the membership amount?
Well, our actual membership in 19 was 446,120,000.
446,000. Okay.
Fiscal year 20, we were 387,754. Our estimated budget in fiscal year 21 was 435,000. We re-estimated it to 310,000.
This is all on page 109 if any of you want to look at it all through.
So I mean, the membership, it's going to take some time to get it back. Now, I'd say 19. You go back and look. 19 was one of our best years that we had for a while.
Typically, we have been in the low fours.
Yeah, so 18 we were 420,000, 17 we were 393,000, and 16 we were 387,000. So I mean, we we were steadily going upward. We had a really good trend there. It's gonna take, just kind of looking back at history, it's gonna take a little bit of time to get back to where we were. It may take us 5 years.
I think the renovation is just gonna bring them in. This is great timing, given the hole that happened through no fault of our own.
Yeah, if we're down now. and-
It'll be up. It's gonna incentivize, yes.
I'd agree with that.
But it's just something that I wanted to highlight, make sure we
Well,
highlight.
that's why, to
Yeah.
reaffirm what Clay said, that's what I like, to look at the trends.
Mhm.
And then try and figure out what you want us to do to help.
Okay. Rec Center, any other questions? As we're looking at? Okay. Leisure Services. Page 51. We re-estimated down the revenue. We didn't have soccer last spring, and just numbers. Baseball, softball was pretty good, for the situation, but in fall sports were average. So I think I can't tell you today where we're at with soccer, but I know we've opened up soccer signups. Usually that's a little bit slow, but we did incentivize or give people a discount if they sign up in January. So hopefully we'll get some good turnout. We'll run that report in January, see where we're at the end of January, see where we're at. But we just, with COVID and everything else, that those revenue numbers had dropped significantly, but we still had staff. We did few reductions on staff when we could and did some things different. So personnel is just one of those things, we had to keep some of that staff on to do some of those things. So, and you got to remember, at a leisure, you have aerobics instructors. We take lifeguard, swim lessons, some of those other things out of leisure. Even though they're working in our building, we've decided to keep our program separate from the rec center expenses and revenue.
And during COVID shutdown, that was where one of our layoffs was in leisure services. So it's not, we stayed full staff even with our full time. We did have a layoff.
And authorized personnel, rec program specialist, the secretary down there is out of leisure. She does do a lot of rec center and theater parts, but we do budget secretary out of leisure services. Aquatics and fitness is about 10%, 15% of my salary, and then you have those part-time hours that add up to 3.25 with that. Any questions with that? I don't want to touch anything else. No,
Well,
just
your initiatives add 3 new programs. Well, do you have an idea what those were?
well, we are looking at a soccer tournament. We did we didn't do a soccer camp like we had last fall. So we did a soccer camp with United Soccer Association. But this year we're looking at having a soccer tournament this spring out there at the field. And then we're looking at a baseball, softball tournament, 11U, 12U, and a 13U tournaments. And one of the other things, we're considering volleyball tournaments. With situation last fall, it just wasn't going to probably be a good situation to look at doing those. Move forward with those. Anything else with the leisure budget? One of the expenses on part-time is the concession stand for the soccer fields. We didn't do that last year, so. Aquatic Center.
We don't get any revenue from that concession stand though, correct?
At soccer?
Yeah,
Yeah, we do.
we do, okay.
Yeah, we keep that. We don't get any revenue from baseball, softball, merchants. Yeah, that's what you're thinking.
No.
Merchants field.
I was thinking out there at the soccer field and.
Soccer's the one that we do.
We do, and then
Baseball, softball, we don't.
Okay.
two different
Yeah.
concession stands.
Well, there's one over there's that one there by the soccer fields, yeah, by the greenhouse.
That's one.
And then there's the concession stand by the
Large one.
baseball fields, yeah.
That one we
That
do
one
not.
we do not, okay.
No, that youth sports complex we do though?
No,
No, we don't.
Okay. So not the merchants or the youth sports complex, but yes, the soccer.
Yes.
Okay.
so does so when we bid out for the merchants, they do the baseball, softball?
What we do is, in the past, this was done several years ago. We charged rent at the youth sports complex and at merchants, $1,000 each. But we were spending $2,000 to $3,000 for a field supervisor at baseball, softball. So Gary McGill has filled that position, so we don't spend that money for the youth sports coordinator out there we do at other when we have other events.
Okay,
But that one, we don't, and in return, we let them use the concession stands.
Okay.
It should be a wash, because when we were running it, we were having trouble getting part-time staff. I mean, he has part-time staff, expenses of the food and those things. We weren't doing very well, so we made the choice probably back in 2010, 2011.
I knew that he was doing the merchants, I guess I didn't.
Yeah,
realize.
and we did add the merchants on
Yeah.
after that. He was doing baseball, softball to begin with, and then because back then, help me, service group Lions did the baseball stadium early on, and then when they got out of it, that was one of the better options we thought was have him come in. He has a concession stand over at Iowa State, and people love the food down at Merchants. I get a lot of compliments on the work he does.
Is there consideration of doing the soccer field that way too, or is that one manageable?
That one's manageable, and also he's a high school coach.
Oh.
So he wouldn't have time to do
Wouldn't
it.
have time to do it.
And we do open for the high school. When the high school games were out at the soccer fields, they've been playing down at the stadium more, but we'd be open for those, and those were some of the best nights when, Atlanta came in for a high school soccer match.
Okay.
So we've lost that too now with high school play
High
most of
school.
their games out at the stadium.
Yeah,
Well, people like to have the service, but it's not one that is going to be a moneymaker for us. And maybe there's other options of other groups that maybe would look at doing the concessions.
Someday maybe you can tell us about our inventory control system for that,
The soccer,
for the product at the soccer field.
yeah. Okay,
Not tonight. That's just curiosity again.
right.
I don't want to manage it for you. It's just curious.
Okay.
Yep.
Aquatic Center. Aquatic Center, we were open. When we opened up, when we could, we had to staff it full staff because, we had good seasons, but the lifeguard staffing at the Aquatic Center is really based off square foot and where they can see. You need someone down at the bottom of the side. You don't necessarily need a full lifeguard up on top. And we did make that change this year to a concession stand worker or someone else when we were needing that extra guards. But the pool deck itself is 6 guards. We can't do it with less. Very often. In some of the evenings, we'll close the slides down and the deep end, and we'll do some things different so we can start letting some guards go if we're talking we have 20 people. We'll make an announcement. We're going to close at 5. If you want to go down the slide several times, this is the time to do it, or 6 o'clock. So that's really the only time. So we really weren't able to cut situations, and we had concession stand people wiping knobs down, wiping down different stuff constantly. With that, that's kind of what we did this past year. That's why the expenses pretty much, stayed close to what we anticipated. We have no capital outlays this next year. We had ours this year. which, the one that we're kind of excited still to purchase are the floatables. We want to put these floatable, when we have pool parties, or we might allow these floatables out from 5 to 7 at night to try to encourage families to come down and use those times, run a special, get a pizza and a drink, and you have these floatables for young families for $20 for the family. So we'll try to do some different marketing things to get that 5 to 7. A lot of times you have the kids that come right at 1 o'clock, and then they're wore out by 4 or 5, or when mom and dad can pick them up. So then from 5 to 7, that's when we see the drop off. So maybe there's some things we can do with providing dinner and drinks and something different that we normally haven't had. So I think those, and during the winter months, we can move the floatables into the rec center and use them for different events with that. So our capital items were replace one of the motors for our pool motor. We're on zones. We have 3 different zones. So normally you have one big zone, but we made the choice. We built a pool to do 3 different ones. So if you need to shut one down, the other 2 can pick up and repair that. Water heaters, we're looking at replacing those. We need to update some of the concession stand equipment that it's been there since 2009. So we'll do that. And paint the slide, we've done it once. We're looking at doing that again this year. A pool lift, and then the floatables. So, and actually one of our pool lifts at the rec, we're starting to see some issues with some wear on it. It does get used a lot. So we'll probably get that for this winter or this summer, and then move it into the indoor and buy and look at the next year budget of getting another one. So there's a lot of use at the rec center. That's been one addition. I think people enjoy those lifts.
I'm sorry.
Aquatic Center?
You're still on Aquatic Center, right?
Yep.
I can't.
The capital items didn't show up. It's back on
I
page
saw them back
22.
on-
There's no new, we have nothing new in the upcoming budget. I would just tell you what we have now.
out of this budget.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
There's nothing additional. We're not adding anything into the new budget.
All right, I wondered. I saw it back there too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, we've painted, we've replaced stuff that we've needed to do. So pool heater, big pool heater, we've done that. So
You did the motor replace. I think we talked about that last year.
yeah. So good question, Clay. Cemetery? Anything else with the Aquatic Center? Cemetery, Mike had sent out some information to you. I believe 5 burials a year. Need 20%, 25% cremations. A typical year of funerals. And you look in a newspaper, you think there's been a lot more, but just, only 2 newspapers now compared to 5. So it seems like maybe there's been more funerals. At least that's what I thought. Personnel expenses, that's going up just slightly. Services, commodities, the same. And then close to being the same. And then we just have the one purchase this year of the 60-inch mower, cab and blower, replacing the cab and blower and the mower. Just it's that time. This mower was when we traded off last time. We were having some issues with it. It really didn't get to the number of hours. We like to keep our equipment for 25 to 3,000 hours typically. That's where this one, I believe, fits in. And then cabin blower, we're constantly doing blowing snow. Cemetery, he helps out where he can once he gets that south sidewalk done in his area, and then through the cemetery, he has some areas that he uses that. So, especially if there's a funeral in the middle of the area and it's deep snow, he'll plow with that. Some paths for them to get in and get around. So it makes it easier for the family and people attending funerals. So.
With the rate increase that we just approved here a couple months ago, we're not seeing any increase in the estimated revenue.
Right. It just seems like it's just flat. Even when we've done other increases, it just seems to be somewhat steady. We could add we went up about 10%. So we'll have to see, if we do conservative.
I'd rather be conservative, but
Yeah,
I'm just curious since numbers look the same.
right.
One thing to keep in mind too is with the increase in cremations, the burial cost is less. Some families also are choosing not to place a loved one in a cemetery anymore, and so they're finding other methods for the ashes.
Right.
So that obviously would have impact the revenues also.
Anything with pages 45 through 56? We want,
Just
Yep.
back on that Laura for the cemetery, is that 42,000 after an anticipated trade-in, or is that 42,000 outright?
traded.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And then if we want to go to page 63, hotel motel tax. And you can see the items down at the bottom of the page in the Parks and Rec that we're looking at using hotel motel tax for. Northeast Park, shelter house roof, that's in shape where we really need to replace that. Again, that's out at Northeast Park. The current shelter house is in really bad shape. So we need to replace that. Grant Park, bathroom, the the west bathroom to the south part. And I think it's actually for both of them, for the one by the skate park and the one south by the end of the road. There's two down there that we're gonna replace those. Rec center exercise equipment, we just had 25,000 as we update equipment. We had 2 new ellipticals put in today. We took 2 out, and we got some bikes we need to replace, and equipment in the exercise room, fitness room, some of those spinning bikes. It's time to replace them, get some different equipment. It's going to be time this fall, summer to replace a couple of the ellipticals in there. So we're just rotating equipment. Usually you can get 6-7 years out of those pieces of equipment at a commercial rate. Commercial use, they're used every day. In our homes, we're able to get 9-10 years out of them. But these are used every day, so we're pushing it at 7-8 years.
Just to clarify, we replaced treadmills today, not ellipticals.
I thought I said treadmills. No, I said ellipticals.
Elliptical,
2
yeah.
treadmills, top, far left, were those that we took. We had one that was really making a lot of noise. So, yep, 2 treadmills we replaced, and then we're going to replace a couple bikes.
What do we do with the old ones?
They're downstairs right now. One we could probably sell. The other one is very loud. I think someone had to spend some money to get the motor, so it's a lot quieter. I mean, we can sell both of them, and as is, make a bid. And we can definitely note on there, these are some of the problems that we currently have with them.
Sell for parts only?
Yeah. Make it.
You did that a while back, then they all went out, didn't they? Yeah, some sitting out there at one time.
Yeah, we had a big sale of
Yeah.
about 10 or 12.
That was right before I started
Yeah.
that sale.
They were sitting there in
Or
the
right when I started, it was early on.
east hallway there for a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah, silent auction. So, yep. Rec center pool heater, time to replace that. And then the cemetery building, roof, soffit, restroom. And we started some of that work. You've seen that plan. We've Chad Hattery had done some of that work for us, but they'll be working, and some of that work has started. So the additional work will be $10,000. Any questions with that?
Graham Park Shelter House bathrooms.
Grand Park bathroom,
Skate park?
the
No,
skate park.
Graham Park Shelter House.
Oh.
The bathrooms it's not on here.
Okay.
The 2 bathrooms on the north side of the shelter house.
Yeah.
Yep.
At one time, did we talk about remodeling those?
We've had discussions of coming from the inside of the building and making them an indoor, because they're really not used other than
Right.
when it's rented. So we had some discussions early on about doing a renovation, make that more of a year-round shelter. But yeah, to redo those north ones, make them so they're indoors. But if you're going to that extent, you need to make them ADA, and there's no way you get 5 feet area to turn around in.
For some reason, I thought we talked about doing that a number of years ago.
We did a few years ago, but it was a lot to do with code compliance. So, I mean, it was just basically you'd almost have to knock it down and start from scratch. And because of the historic value, I think we decided that we would just leave it as is and get by as long as we can.
Plus, for the year round,
Yeah.
it's hard to do because they use it for storage in the winter time.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
We
only
can-
a summertime operated building anyway.
Yeah.
But I do have people complain about
Mhm.
those bathrooms,
Okay.
just prehistoric or whatever, they're not very nice. And
Yeah.
Right.
people, I just didn't know, I didn't have an answer for them. So,
Yeah.
They like to go in and clean them out, scrape some of the paint, repaint them.
they're just not very.
Yeah, no, I
they're not
know.
pleasant.
The age.
I don't know how much you could do to them without a complete
Is that-
renovation, but
Is
yeah.
that part of our renovation of Grand Park, looking at those, or?
Yep.
Was it?
Yeah,
Is that where we talked about that?
that could be. I know one time you had talked at, when you were on the Parks and Rec board, you talked to the council
Right.
about making that an indoor. And one of the other tough things is it's a brick building with no insulation. For the winter, you're really gonna have to insulate that, probably put up drywall or some other woods inside to make it a lot warmer. I think there's a need for a year-round shelter. We do allow people into Southside. I think there's a group that does a Thanksgiving event there. And then we finally just say we're closing it around January 15th until April, so we can do some repairs. We like to go in there and paint, work on the tables, work on the bathrooms, and do those things. We need some time because that's probably slightly more used than Graham, because now it's air conditioned. I think that's making a big difference. People like that. So there is a need for year-round indoor. Swan Lake, they do wonderful things out there, and there's other towns around us that have great facilities too. But on the list, we can make it happen if you want. So, okay. So that was Hotel Motel, page 63, and then 71. If you look down in the middle, the 506,000, that is for the Trails project. Phase 3, we have $506,000 available. I've shared with you the Shine Hattery's pre-estimate was right around 300,000. That was 20 numbers, so you're probably looking at 21, a 6 to 8% increase. So 24,000. They are real close. I would say they're 90% done with plans. They're kind of waiting on us to pick some dates to go out to bid, to do all those things. But there's things we need to do on our side first. We need a public meeting. We need to talk to the residents so that they're aware of what's going on. And do you do a Zoom meeting or, invite them that way, or do you wait till you're going to be outside at Northeast Park to kind of talk to them, have them come out for that event? So those are things that we'll decide. But there's also some areas where the trail needs to go that we don't have access yet. So there's some work on that yet to be done. Those two things are really what's waiting for phase 3, which is 18th Street, all the way down through Northeast Park, and then just south at the retirement home, assisted living facility. We want to get down to that corner, and then you want to go east all the way over to the other road. So those are things that we will keep working on, but hopefully we can get something with this next trail phase this fall. That would be a good time frame. Hopefully we can get everything done and continue that with that. While I'm thinking of it, you guys had asked me Monday night on the trail. We did remove the snow yesterday. They went right before lunch. They 2 blowers, the 47-inch blowers, I believe, around the baseball, softball fields, soccer fields, jumped over to the golf course, the school's golf course, around over to 18th, the whole trail. Those phase 1 and 2 that we've done, 2.5 hours. Hour for the fields, hour and a half for the rest of it. That was two blowers going. So they got all done, went to lunch, came back. It was blowing in on the north side of the ball fields. It was already, and the west side. So basically what they spent that hour, it was filled right back in.
That's why I'm like, you look at that and go, maybe that's something that you wait till when the weather's fine, go in and clean it out then.
And again, these guys, you'll see them out here shoveling snow. They're out here in the front side library. They have a lot of facilities that they're doing.
Right.
As much as we, would love to add around the fields, yesterday was an eye opener.
But you can have the sun out there shining and the wind's blowing.
Yeah.
It's just going to blow it all back in again after something like today. So.
I mean, that's the issue. Is it's going to be a constant operation. I think even if you say, well, let's wait until it's a little bit warmer, maybe you get a crust on the snow, the public's not going to understand why we're not out there doing it. They're going to see a day like today where it's sunny. Yeah, it's a little chilly, but they want to get out there and do it. I think we still really advocate that we don't want to set that. I mean, if the expectation is we just don't have the staffing to meet their expectations, if that's what the direction we want to head.
But by doing your tests that you just did, you got documentation why you can.
Well, we can't.
I mean, it was pretty obvious yesterday.
Time-intensive project.
Yeah, that North Fields is not going to be very cooperative with the wind, and it's just open area. And
Yeah, if they're out there doing that, they're neglecting somewhere else.
Yeah.
Is the thing, so. Very good.
okay. Everyone okay with that? If you would turn to tab I, pages 105 through 116. Oh, that's kind of what everything we kind of went over.
What we had discussed.
Yeah, I
Said we've
detailed
already-
that. So unless any other questions, 138 through 139. Cultural, rec center cultural. We started this probably, Laura, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, we started this cultural budget. We decided that, it was decided with council and management that we wanted to allocate some funds to cultural to kind of track what we're doing at the theater and some of those things. So the revenue, those are dance recitals, businesses that have their meetings down here, when they do the pesticide testing, those courses, those businesses that need a larger area, that's where we get our revenue from. We've had a concert, just different things. So not much, obviously, this past year. Most things were shut down and we weren't able to do those things. So with that, and then expenditure-wise, some of the staff.
Hold up a minute. You lost me there. You said it was down for this year. The re-estimate's at 4,000, right?
Yeah. Where we had budgeted 11.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, down considerably then from that 1920 year.
Yeah.
14.
Yep.
Yep. And
We had for a concert, and we just had different things. And one thing we do during the summer, we used to do the theater program ourselves. We'd get the volunteers, we'd hire the staff. And finally one year, last year's Marcy was here, her and I had a conversation. Why don't we bring in another group to run it? We'll give them we won't charge them rent to use the theater, but we'll split the profits after expenses. And that's kind of what we've done with the Carroll Community Theater Group, is they get the performance, they pick the performance, we let them use the facility at no cost, but we're calling it our program too with them. And then we get a good detailed description of the money brought in. We split it after expenses 50-50. And that's worked well the last several years. And some years the program is off the charts. Other years, just some of the attendance drops off. So it really does vary. And then even last year we had concert that we brought in some additional funds for. So, and sometimes the revenue is when some of those groups decide, the dance recitals, some of those things, when we get all settled, the money maybe doesn't get in until July. So that could play in whether we get the money in June or July. So we try to work with them and get the revenue in. So that could be why maybe 14 was up just a little bit more with that. I know the concert, and there was a really good show with community theater.
Hey Jeff, with the dance recitals though, we charge them rent, right?
Yes.
And we don't get half their profits.
No.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. So they just charge them for the rent, and you know, and we had the situation that, you know, some days they're just using the stage. You know, we don't charge them for the seats, and some of them really broke that down. And that's one thing we're looking at to do different. So yeah. So repair maintenance, we just add a little money to that. We figured out what portion the theater is to the electric, so we put the electric to the theater charge. This was different things. So, and then the big thing is we do have $250,000 available to improve lighting, sound, some of those things. And I can't remember if Mike, you were in that meeting when we met with the group, but they gave us a list, and one of their big things is they want new seats in there. That you're not going to get it at $250,000. There's 396 seats, and I'm guessing you're probably going to be $200, $300 a seat. So that's going to be a significant amount. But I think we could tear up carpet. We could improve that. We have sound system, the lighting, some of those things that really needs to be improved. The floor, that was one of the big ones. We're talking about different styles of floors. You really don't see that wood floor that we have anymore. There's other things that we can do different in there. So we have the money available, and you know, that's Laverne, you're talking about, you know, informing the public about the rec center project. I think from surveys and from when I was talking to people, maybe why there was no votes. Well, and I had calls. Why aren't you doing anything to the theater? And I would tell them, you know, we already do have $250,000. We're going to do some improvements. Well, that's not enough, and it probably isn't with the seats and some other things. But this is a great start, and the groups that I talked to, they're excited about this, seeing this get done.
The biggest thing with the seats is it's an aesthetic issue. I mean, structurally, the seats are in really good shape. There's not any issues. Aesthetically, they don't like the color. You know,
I mean, that's
really
what,
what it
can
comes
you
down to.
recover them?
It's all
You do like
coming
a-
back though.
Yeah.
That color's coming back.
They have it over the new library at Ames.
Right.
Yeah,
The city library, it's orange everywhere.
Oh my God.
It's back.
Life's a wheel.
And the other big component to the theater is handicapped accessibility. You know, really, we have one area where you can have a couple chairs, and then sometimes someone's in a wheelchair wants to sit next to their family member. They're in the hallway and they're in the walkway, and you can't have that. Fire code. We had a discussion with that. Fire marshals in town for one of the performances. So.
Is it Carroll Community Theater that we work with?
Yep.
With, if there was another group that wanted to do that same sort of thing, would you do the same?
Oh, absolutely.
With them? Like,
Oh yeah.
they'd have free rent but split profits? I just was curious.
Yeah, we would look at those options, absolutely. Because we don't have the expertise in the theater, but we have the facility, and we have days that we need to use it. I've shared with you many times, we use about 150 to 160 days. And that's including when Kemper's there for 30 days, and some of those are just practices. I'm counting those as part of that 160. So there's a lot of days available. And that's one of the things when I mentioned earlier that with the rec superintendent, I guess it was with you, Doc, talk about the rec superintendent, what we're doing. How great would it be to have a marketing person that call the Sioux City sympathy, and get different groups to come to perform here. Des Moines has areas, just those individuals that could really market our facility and get these other groups in, I think would be a nice asset to get those additional 40 nights of events in there.
And I know we've done where even some of these music groups, I think we had I don't know if it was a puppet individual that came in, and I think in those relationships, we actually split the ticket sales. So, you know, we've done some alternative arrangements just to get some use in there, and I think just get some activity in the community that people appreciate.
Jack, maybe check with Spencer. I know not too long ago, they've been doing that and they brought Mannheim Steamroller to Spencer. It was amazing.
Yeah. But with that position, you know, a rec superintendent, they're helping with baseball, softball, those leagues. They're doing all those different things where if you had a marketing person, someone in that office to do those things just for the rec center. And then if they have additional duties, you know, we can have them look at softball tournaments, baseball tournaments, soccer tournaments to help with those. Those one-day events, I'm big on having those down at the rec and our facilities. One day, you know, if you have a kids' night out, you have 250 kids at $10. That's $250 for one night. Rec center, you have additional revenue of $2,500 every day. You know, those are things that we're doing. But, you know, Grant and the other staff are running leagues and some of those things. So we're still trying to finalize what we're going to do with that rec superintendent.
We kind of talked at the planning session too about having possibly an intern that could come and help with marketing.
Yep.
Jack, watch your foot. You're into the court.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. Good questions. Good discussion. Anything else with that? All right. So that was tab M. Q. Some of these we've kind of discussed. 57. These are just some of the smaller things that we have. The 58,312 is for the golf, the irrigation system. That's that dollar amount. 158. 100,000 again for the rec center. That's probably the HVAC unit. We're using the money for that out of there. 173, 174. Trust funds. People donate to the rec center. We put the money in the permanent trust fund unless they tell us something different. And then when we do get the interest off the trust, we can use the money for different projects. We've used them for fitness equipment, the activity or the exercise room, fitness room, some of the machines or some of the bikes in there we've done with that. 174, that's just interest off the accounts. And then tab U. These are just some of the cap projects that I think we've kind of touched base on, but start page 202, make sure we didn't miss anything. Or you have any additional questions? Miscellaneous grants, probably the big one is the REAP grant that we're doing. We did have a meeting today on the REAP grant, and I just got some dollar figures for some of the things that we want to do. Some of the necessity areas down there at the drainage ditch, we should have money to do that. Do some of the cosmetics, some of the fun stuff that you would like to see down there. We have the one thing, and I knew that we weren't going to be able to go down both sides with a system that looks great. There's going to have to be some area. We're going to repair areas by the drainage ditches, some of the piping through Grant Park. Some of those areas need to be touched. When we did the tennis courts, that inlet up there needed some work. So that stuff's going to get done. But and we're working on trying to make it so when you're driving down Grant Road, you don't see all that tall grass and some of that. I don't think that usually looks very appealing. But it's not going to be a nice, complete riprap. It's going to have to be some tall grass and we can control it better, but it won't be a total control like we were maybe hoping, unless we want to spend another $200,000 or so. I think you'll see some improvements. We probably not. The plan showed to have kind of an area that you walk down. You can get down about halfway, have some seating, and people wanted to have lunch or something on that. That's probably not going to happen. But you can have benches up on top of that area if people want to sit there by the creek and do some of those things. So we are accomplishing the needs of that area, but maybe not the fun stuff, the real appealing looking. You know, when we did this plan back in 14-15 with Iowa State, we pretty much told them we want Taj Mahal of everything. The stadium, Grant Park, talking about the shelter, additional playground area. So it has a wide scope and a real nice, big, long wish list of things we want to do. And I think now with some of the reality and some of the financial situations, I think we're gonna we have a grant to do $125,000 of improvements there. I think that's a great start. We had budgeted $75,000, so we're close to, you know, we have the $200,000 available. So we'll have a project for you. I think you'll like it. It'll be presented to you, but we still need conversations with the county, and I've given them some suggestions on things that I think we still need in that area to make it viable and appealing. And, you know, like I said today, I just don't want to create a situation that we remove all this area and we create an area where it floods easier. There's more flooding. We've had 2 or 3 floods since I've been here. It's been back to the road. It's been by the museum, by the basketball courts. So it does flood. It doesn't flood every year, but there has been 2 or 3 times where it's flooded. So we want to make sure we're not creating more floods. So I think all those things will be considered, and I hope to have a plan back to you in the next 60 days to review with you. We'll have Shad Hatter here and the experts. You've had Craig Erickson here several times, and he'll come present the plan to us, and I think you'll like it. Then page 203, that just breaks down the 506 again. There's all these other projects are done. Grant Park Phase 1 is completed. Pickleball courts, that will be completed this spring. Like I mentioned before, all we need to do is paint and put the net posts up and the nets, and that will be ready to go with that. Lighting, youth sports complex is done. I think Trails Phase 2 is complete. I don't think there's anything outstanding. I think we've closed everything. They had to come back and seed a couple times, and then finally we took a deduction, I believe, and we did it ourselves. So then, yeah, so I think that's page 203. And then again, here's the money from Lost and Motel Tax for the trail project. The Hotel Motel, $100,000 for the theater. I believe, Laura, I don't know if that on page 204, the $250,000 that we have from Lost, $150,000. That's for the trails, and probably the Hotel Motels, the trails too.
Yes, both of them.
Yeah, both are okay. Perfect. So, then the interest, and that's the next page. 206 is the street. Tab V. We talked about this. I just mentioned the permanent trust fund at the rec. Well, first is cemetery. So when we sell a lot, we are required to put 25% of that into a perpetual fund. We have chosen to do 50%. So we're doing more than what we've had to do in the past. And, you know, I think I've shared with you, we have 18,000 spots. Right at 10,000 are occupied or have been used, and there's about another 4,000 sold that are sitting there. So we have about 3,000 to 5,000 available, really spread out. There's not I guess up on the southwest corner of the new section, there's a lot of open spots. And before our time, there's decision every other row. We're going to be flush markers. Those aren't selling. You know, talked about letting uprights there, but then Laverne's, you know, someone 10 years ago, that was all they could do. They really wanted to be by someone, and we told them, we can be by them, but you have to have a flush marker. They went and bought that. Now we turn it over to uprights. I'll get a lot of calls. So, but on the other hand, at some point, if you don't sell them, you need to think about, where you're going to go with them to try to get them sold. So,
Is there a time frame to open up to the south more?
we haven't. I think at some point you look at. I think in the next 5 years, you look at that area, you start pinning it, or you start mapping out how you want it. You do a master plan probably in about 5 years to see how it could look, and then because once you sell it, those other 4,500, 3,500 probably aren't going to be sold. And you want to get those. You want to get that number. I don't know what that number is to 95% occupied or sold in that area, and then you open up the new area. Mike, and we've had a lot of interest in an upright area for ashes, columbarium. Yeah, for cremations, because we're getting those numbers. Maybe you look at putting that up first, and then look at other areas. And once you go to that area, you do have the FFA. You do have the community gardens. They're probably, I think the FFAs maybe could find other areas to go to, but the community gardens, where you go with that. So, but both groups know that that's a possibility at any time, and that's why we go year to year, with those leases.
And I do think there's a time where you pin it, pin it, and then you probably have a 5 to 10 year period of just landscaping, getting the grass established and trees put in, road network put in. So it'll be a process for us. It's not going to be an overnight thing.
Yeah, I guess that's why I pointed out, because it's going to take a while to build that up. And if you're looking at 4 to 5 years that you maybe ended up over there,
we've looked at the amount of availability we have. We're not in a point that we're
close
exceeding
to,
that.
okay.
The columbarium, the one thing about that, I know we had a quick conversation with someone about it, just price wise. Reality is the cost per niche in it may actually exceed the lot price. So one alternative may be to actually create a cremation area.
Mm-hmm.
Just it's a lower cost alternative since we have the land, and really plan out that we're going to do smaller lots for just a cremation area. That may be something, but I think those decisions are a long ways out yet.
Yeah, I mean, they have some of those that are stacked, and you can just put 2 or 3 or 4 in a container at one time.
But I think that's what Mike's trying to say is that unit maybe is $120,000,
right?
And you have 250 spots to put in. Divide that. That's more than a lot.
Lot is, yeah.
Your niche price is probably $1,000 versus a lot that's $500.
Yeah.
So, unless the city's going to say we're going to subsidize it just so we save land, that's a really may not work out.
May not work out pricing yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's what I have for you tonight. If you guys have any questions or anything you want us to look at.
Oh, Jack, I've had a few people ask me, are you replacing the trees that have been taken down, or?
At this point, we have not replaced any of those. These were ones, the cemetery, that's a tough one to go back and replace, because there's just a lot of areas where the tree roots were getting into places you didn't want them. So that was a good thing to get rid of some of them. We will put a plan together. I think we're going to get through this next set and then come back, take a look, and we'll replant trees.
But you will replant, not necessarily where they were removed.
Yeah. Yep.
Good.
Anything else I can answer?
I would suggest maybe we take 5 or 10
Yeah,
minutes.
say maybe we can take about 10 minutes if people want to stretch and go to the restroom. So with that, we'll go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back in about 15 minutes. tab E. All right. Oh. All right, welcome back. We're going to go ahead and continue with our budget meeting. And Laura, if you want to start on the administration part and tab E, when you're ready, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so the rest of the discussion for tonight is kind of going through the admin area and then a bunch of all the other areas that we need to finish up going through the pages. So the first area that we've talked just a little bit about, but we'll finish talking about, is on page 57 for the what we call the community and economic development area. This is, we've discussed just a little bit about this already. We have the request from CADC, or the Carroll Area Development Corporation. The request is the same for fiscal 22 as it was in fiscal 21 of $77,250. Also in this area is what we call the housing. And this includes $2,000 that the housing trust that Region 12 manages, a contribution towards that for the community, as well as $2,000 if for the city to do work. Typically it's been with Region 12 on if we were going to look for a CDBG grant, if we need to do some housing work, that the funding will be open for that. And another smaller area called the planning and zoning. This is where if somebody is planning on platting an area and there's a slight plan to do that, and then for recording the plats, this is the area that we track that revenue expenses for it. The next area is the general government. It includes expenses for the legislative and executive area that deals with expenses related for council and the mayor. Big area, or I would say the main takeaway from this area is we do have some funds allocated to look at agenda management software. There still is some monies allocated in fiscal 21 and 22 with that. We've looked at a couple different providers, haven't settled on anything yet, and we still want to do some more research before we're ready to make a decision on that one. But there is some funding available for it. The next area is for the financial administration. This is basically for the operations of City Hall, the staffing and just all the other day-to-day things that go on in the office. The revenues here is mostly the admin fee that we charge for the garbage collection, as well as any late fees that are put on utility bills. The revenue goes into this area. I gotta take a look here real quick. The big change in this area under services and services and commodities for here is we are looking at upgrading our current financial software package, what we call Encode. They have another product available where it would allow us to do, it has a lot more flexibility in some of the reports and the data that we can get out of the software. We have to do a little bit more research on this and get a pretty good number on how much we think it would cost to make that transition, but we want to take a hard look at that. I talked to a community today converting from the current version we're on to the next version that they have available in this community. They love it. The flexibility is great. They're able to get a lot more information out of it. And their comment was, I wish I would have done it sooner. So we're looking at it.
Okay.
So we're looking at
How many
Is
people are
this
in the financial software?
What's that?
How many people are in it? Is it like just mostly you and Mike?
No, it's pretty much all of our
All of
staff
this-
here
okay.
at City Hall.
I just wasn't sure.
Yep.
So, I mean, we run everything from our water utility, just our basic financial
Payroll,
Everything
accounts.
is out of that Encode.
yep,
Building
building permitting
permits.
process is out of that.
Is it kind of designed for municipalities then?
Yes, yes.
Now, did I hear you say a different company that makes it
Just the next generation, the next version of it, yep.
good? Because I was going to offer to get you like a military helmet or something for Mike so you could be protected if you change software systems. It's
Well,
Not
it is
fun.
quite the change from what we're understanding. We did do a demo of the software, pretty brief. I mean, it was really quick overview, and we only touched on a couple of the areas. And it's really different, like just the look of it is really different. So it's gonna be some definite transition for staff to get used to something like this. That's why we're still investigating, but we know there's a lot of perks and advantages that come along with the
Reality is
greater version.
if we announce tomorrow, yep, we're making the switch and we sign a contract, it's almost an entire year before we make it. And then it's like modules get transferred over. So there's just a lot of work. But to me, like the reporting component, I get very frustrated because there's just no good way of getting very easy, concise reports out of the system. And at least one of the things that really excites me is there's what's called like cell mapping. And so I know I want this figure that's in this report, and I want to put it in my own report and really make a concise one-page report. But I'm going to run that report every single month. Well, they can set those up that you get those figures pulled out, do these really simple reports, and then we can give you good data and see trends that happen over time. Where right now it's just it's really hard to see those trends. So to me, that's the exciting part of it. Now it's a big investment, but again, it's an investment we do once a decade. So
I guess I'd be curious to watch if any of the service or subscription fees with it for maintenance and assistance change or not, and how that works. So,
and the comment we got was they stay the same.
that's
So
great.
there's no change there. It's really just the migration cost that we're paying for.
They'd probably want to get you over to the new system, so you're not. I'm guessing this is a legacy system we're on. They're moving to the new one, or they keep both of them all the time.
We did ask that question, and at this point, they still have over 50% of their customers still on this current version. So they were not talking end of life with it right now, but there are definitely benefits of the newer system that might entice, or what I'm sure is what is enticing a lot of the clients to switch over to the newer system.
I had to switch vendors. They only stopped hating me at the dealership after a decade, so it wasn't bad.
And we've been on this system ever since 2000, I think is when we started this transition over to what we're on right now. So it's been 20 years.
The one thing that I think is the rub we have right now is we have 20 years of data in our financial system, and data is key. You know, just being able to go back and make comparisons is really good. We haven't got a clear answer, but they've initially told us it's 5 years is what they can bring over. And, you know, so that's one thing. It's like, man, it's really tough to lose that data. But if we're going to lose the data, at some point you got to bite the bullet, because at some point our current version 9 is going to go away and 10 is going to be it. We're going to have to make the transition. We're going to lose the data at some point. And that's the only rub I think I have right now, is just the loss of that data. But
What about operating systems? I'm assuming we probably need to upgrade some operating systems, some computers and such to manage the software.
I'm not
We didn't say that, no.
I'm not aware of that. And we keep our computers fairly up to date. I mean, I know there's some governments you hear that they're running Windows 95. No, we're in fact, everyone's on Windows 10 now because of some security reasons. We made that change. Now, one of the things we're going to take a hard look at is, do we house it in-house, which we do today, or do we house it on the cloud? And there's some reasons that may be beneficial to do that, just from a disaster recovery standpoint, that we don't have to worry about, you know, a tornado hits City Hall where our server is. It's still available, and we can do it. You think about from the building permit standpoint, if you had a tornado go through town, that's a critical piece. We need it right now today. You know, so that's some stuff, and frankly, there's some cost with going with the cloud, but yet you don't have to have a server. And timing wise, our server is right at that point that
Yeah, we're about 2 or 3 years out.
You just hit my next question, and I made that change a couple of years ago at our business, and I never looked back. That's been another one of those great changes.
Yep.
And with the type of internet service that we have in here, your downtime would be nil, and I would bet money your speed would come up from that.
And we made a transition 3 years ago for our email, and that was a really good transition, where we were housing it in-house, we went to the cloud. And frankly, even from a standpoint of before we made the transition to the cloud, we had to go through a web browser anytime we were outside of City Hall, where now my Outlook works wherever, right? And that's really nice. I can be at home with my laptop. It's the same as if I'm in City Hall. So there's some benefits of going to the cloud.
Are these Windows-based, meaning you could work from home, pull it up on your own computer and that?
My email?
Yeah, your own, yes.
Yeah.
You know, you can work from home on your email, but you can probably do that with your software upgrade you're talking about. If you go to a cloud-based one, you can
Yeah,
do that.
if you go to cloud-based, yes.
Is that what you meant, Jerry, or did you mean the email?
No, I was talking like you are, right now, you can't work at home on the system, right?
I actually can. We made an
Okay.
upgrade this summer with COVID and all that, just as a preparation. If we ever had to leave City Hall, we added a new firewall that allows us VPN connectivity to our server now. So we do have that ability. We did not have that before. In fact, I unfortunately, when I broke my arm, was the guinea pig for a week because I worked a lot at home then. And, so I was actually the first one to get it loaded on my computer. But so we do have that capability now. But so those are some of the things. There's going to be a lot of things we're going to have decisions that we ultimately move forward with it. But that's in the budget now.
Good thing to have in the budget, especially after 20 years.
Well, I mean, the company Incode, they continue to support the current version we're on, so it's not going away. They've made upgrades, they've kept it going, so it still functions well.
Yeah.
It's just the reporting is very rigid. That was the word that was used today when I was talking to that city, was it's rigid, where the next version is flexible.
I used to use the term sucks for my reports, and now they're really good. So I appreciate we're going from one to detail all the reports and yeah.
I've never thought about it, but that's a good,
colorful adjective.
yeah.
Rigid,
Yeah.
yeah, rigid.
I was thinking it sucks, but colorful.
Sucks that it's rigid.
Okay, so that's the major thing that's coming out of the financial, otherwise it's pretty much business as usual in financial area.
Laura, can I have you back up just quick? I was gonna ask you a question about those miscellaneous revenues, total revenue estimates.
Uh-huh.
The last year that you don't have an actual estimate, when you have an actual concrete amount, were you close? Is that about what you were? Because I see, 21 obviously is still an estimate. I just want to know if it's coming out about right where you think it is. When you look back. Like 20 would be the last one you could actually tell, correct?
Right, yep. So in fiscal 19, we ended at 33,800, fiscal 20, 32,900. And so now we're anticipating roughly 38,000.
It's reasonable.
Close. One of the down things and it's not a huge amount, but if you recall, in fiscal 20, we did 3 months of no penalties on utility bills. So that was a little bit of an impact there. Any other questions either on the legislative or the financial area?
One comment with just talking about the penalties, really our utility collections, we really didn't see any major change with COVID. We were, compared to the year earlier, very consistent, and even today we've been very consistent.
In the financial area, the same number of staff is proposed. And then we typically budget a little bit of money every year for computer replacements. Since we're heavily based with computers, just like most businesses, you need to have computers working to get to your projects. And the next area is under the elections. Fiscal 22 includes 2 elections at 12,500. there is a city election, and the last city election was roughly about $6,200. And then this added, or there is the opportunity to have another one if we wanted to, if we needed to.
I mean, with the discussion, we did have it kind of pegged for election, anticipating a rec center. If that's not a direction we're gonna go, which it sounds like that's where we're headed, that would be one area we could reduce now, if that's a desire the council has.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I wouldn't mind seeing that.
So we'll add that to our list of 3 items then.
Well, if you go for election, you're September before you have that. So you lost, this whole year with planning, right? If you go to an election or in the rec center,
Yeah.
it's September.
Correct.
You don't know then, you can't even start
We wouldn't start any design work
no,
until.
so you're missing at least probably
But
8
the
months.
election would be based on if you were to do the full project.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do
Full
an
project.
election if you're doing the part project.
Right.
With the gym and locker rooms, that we don't have to have that.
Right,
on.
so you're gaining 8 months or so.
Right, and they can start doing the design work.
So we cut that in half, correct? So we'll put that in.
Make that adjustment.
There's $7,500 right there for the Timberline project.
They could move that up to executive payroll.
The next area is the legal services, or the city attorney retainer amount comes in here, as well as anytime we contact Allers for bonding tip questions or personnel issues. So that's some of that stuff there as well.
How long is our contract with Dave for? Is that every year?
I believe it's automatically renewing and it's in effect until either party cancels.
Oh, okay.
The next area is the City Hall general building. This would be expenses that relate to just the upkeep with the City Hall building, from the electrical, the heating, cleaning services. Obviously not anticipating any major repairs since it's a new building. We're hoping not. So there's not a whole lot of change in that area at this point from one year to the next. Out of this area, we do budget 2/3 of a building maintenance specialist out of this area.
Is that Andy?
Yeah.
That part of
That
it?
is- The next area is for the tort liability. This is where we account for all the insurance, property liability, worker comp, all gets paid out of this area. This is the expense side of it. The revenue side is a different section of the budget. This is just the expense side of it. And this is for the whole city, including water and wastewater and streets and everybody. Even though water and wastewater do contribute towards this, it's a transfer from their areas into the general fund, but this has the area to account for the total expense.
So did you treat that like a revenue when it comes from one to the other?
No, it's called a transfer and
Just
it's
a
not
transfer.
counted as revenue.
Okay.
Got a question on the attorney. Is that amount, is that just one amount regardless of how many hours he puts in, or is that an estimated amount of?
So,
Is he charging us by hour?
so he is paid, the city attorney is paid a retainer fee to
Just to
basically
be available.
to be available and to come to council meetings, I believe is what that covers. Now, if he does additional work for us, reviewing contracts, helping with agreements and things, that is billed separately. Or work that he does with the police department to try cases and things like that, that's billed separately.
So this amount that you have here includes both aspects of that?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes,
So that's kind of an estimated that he will be working those extra hours.
yes.
Is the 9133, that's the
That's the
retainer?
retainer
Yeah,
part.
that's retainer, and then the benefits like the FICA and IFRS that go with it.
Yep.
That's that portion, and then the other portion is like the contracted services, or when we call for that, as well as that's also where we account for if we need to call Kristen Cooper to ask a question about bonding, or Nathan Overberg to ask about TIF.
Mike Galloway, personnel.
Mike Galloway for personnel issues. Yep.
So Laura, when we contact Dave, the owner so question, that's covered underneath the retainer.
No, that might get billed separately. Yep.
And it's fund money work, I suppose.
I believe the retainer just covers that he's the city attorney and to come to council meetings.
Now, I would say Dave doesn't always charge for everything.
Yeah.
So,
And his hourly rate is way less than like what we get charged from Allers.
Allers, if I talk to him for a minute, it's ridiculous. So I try not to call for a minute.
Right.
Have something planned.
Get to the point.
Keep it at 59 seconds.
No, the rule of thumb is you have 3 things to talk to him at once. Get your money's worth.
Yep.
All right, any other questions? The last section is our miscellaneous general fund. Is kind of the catch-all. If there's like nowhere else to put it in the budget, it gets put in here. As you can see from fiscal 21 reestimate, we received quite a bit in revenue, the intergovernmental. That's, the bulk of it, like 233,000, is the COVID money that the state allocated to the cities and the counties. Our portion is in there. And then we're still working through FEMA. Haven't heard anything for a couple months, but we're still hoping that we can get some monies from FEMA for COVID-related expenses. I don't have a timeline when that may occur. And then the expenses in there is kind of like the catch-all. If it doesn't fit somewhere else, it ends up in this area. Any questions on that part, what we call the general government part? The next section is the transfers. And this is where we either are transferring money out or transferring money in to the general fund. So part of it is we're transferring $50,000 out to streets for the sidewalk transition plan. And we do not have anything anticipated to be transferred out in fiscal 22. However, in fiscal 21, we have a little bit that we're planning to transfer out to, part of it is to the CP housing, the Capital Project Housing Fund, for the city's portion of the CDBG housing rehab grant. This is the remainder amount for the city portion, the city match. And then to the airport capital projects fund, there is a little bit that the city needs to match to finish out some of their projects that they've been doing. Transfers in, a little bit comes in from water and wastewater to cover what we estimate is their portion for the insurance, the property, the liability, the worker comp insurance. And the bulk of it is the amount that comes from the employee benefit special revenue fund to cover employee benefit costs that relate to the employees that are paid out of the general fund.
So this has no regulations on where it goes?
The general fund,
No, this transfer out, right here.
right, it's up to council to decide.
Okay.
The next area is the general revenues. This is the bulk of the revenue that the general fund receives. And it's basically, most of it is taxes, the 810 and the liability insurance gets deposited into this part of the budget. Another significant part, or about 105,000 is what we anticipate to get from the cable franchise fee. And then this is also the area where we deposit what we called from the state, the backfill money. It's when the state made their changes a few years ago and they rolled back the commercial and the industrial properties to 90%. They have been backfilling some of that. We're not getting the whole amount because they froze the pot of money a couple of years ago and said, this is the amount that we're gonna allocate to all the cities and counties that were impacted by this. And then you just get your percentage based upon, I'm not sure how they do their formula, but we've been getting about $140,000 to $150,000 into the general fund for that.
Oh, I saw a separate franchise fee in here, didn't
There is a cable franchise fee that's in this area, and then there's the
I?
electric.
The electric one, that's
Yep,
that's
we'll
the
get
new
to
one.
that.
Okay.
Yep, that one's coming up.
So this is the cable franchise
This is
fee.
the cable that's in this area. Interest is. Okay.
Oh,
Just
there it is.
include that. Interest rates are been going down, so we're gonna see interest income go down as well in our budgets.
Yep.
And then just a few other minor revenue amounts come into the general fund is what's remaining in there. So that's the bulk of the general fund, pretty much everything else. Does anybody have some questions that they thought of, that they wanted more information about with the general fund? That would have taken care of tab K. What's the next one on here? Got tab L.
Oh, the property relief from lost. That doesn't go in here.
No. Nope, that's on a local option sales tax, and we'll get to
So it
that.
just stays in the, okay,
Yep, we'll get to
sorry.
that.
Oh,
So the admin areas that we have listed on our sheets, we went through the summary sheets, and then tab K and L are those, the accounting of those areas that we just talked about. So is there, anybody think of any questions, or do you want to keep moving on to the other areas?
I'm good.
good. That was hotel, motel, then the electric franchise after that.
Oh, we already talked about that, sorry.
Well,
Under the other areas, we talked about
Yeah.
page 57 already.
K and L.
Okay, so page 63, under the summaries, Jack talked a lot about the hotel motel. You should have received in the front cover a summary, a more detailed summary, I would say, of the breakdown of the hotel motel fund. This is technically, the hotel motel is a part of the general fund, but we just track it separately because it does kind of have that a little bit of special revenue feel to it that we do need to track it separately. But for reporting purposes, it gets all moved into the general fund. We're not sure exactly where hotel motel tax collections are going or heading. We only get allocations from the state on a quarterly basis. And I would say the last quarter that we got, it seemed like it was dropped off too significantly from other prior quarters or prior times in previous years. So our estimate here is pretty much a swag. We're not sure exactly where it's going. And then we just don't know where it's gonna head from there to, based upon these last 2 years that you see on your sheet, these were actually kind of a couple lower years. We had other years where we were closer to $240,000 or $250,000 in collections. So not sure what went on the last 2 years that we saw those a little bit down to begin with. So we're hoping that it at least can come back to where we were projecting it closer to that $200,000 to $220,000 range. Jack talked about a lot of the expenses in here that relate to the park and rec area. The other couple areas that we do track in here is, this is where we allocate for chamber tourism promotion. And the request for fiscal 22 is $22,000. And then this is also an area where we allocate some funds to do what we would call like some public relation things. One item in here that we have tagged right now is the website upgrade. So that's being allocated in fiscal 21. And then it's also just to have a little bit of funding available for if a project comes before us and it's a good use of the taxpayer, or the hotel motel tax collections. There's something in the budget that we could do that project. It's not a huge amount, but just a little bit of funding. Any questions on hotel motel?
You had mentioned it goes into the general fund.
It does, for reporting purposes.
For reporting? How do you make sure it doesn't go to payroll expenses?
Because we do have it tracked as kind of a sub-fund in the way we present this, it is a separate sub-fund. And there's just the way we have it all set up. It's
That's the
tracked
encode
this way.
software.
Yeah.
That takes care of that.
Yep, it's a separate line on your fund balances sheet, so then we can see it's this. And so then we know that any expenses going to that sub-fund, hotel motel, relates to expenditures for that purpose. The next area is the electric franchise. So we are anticipating this to begin actually very soon.
Page 64.
The summary sheet is page 64. So based upon some information we've received from Mid-American, this is our best guess of where we think the revenues may end up. Obviously, collections in time will tell if we're close or not. The agreement states that we will get the franchise fee remitted to the city on a quarterly basis. So with it just beginning, we're only anticipating 1 quarter of collections in fiscal 21 and then 4 quarters in fiscal 22. So
When does that start? Does it start January 1st?
no, I believe we're on schedule to start February 1st. That was some of the stuff that
Yeah,
working with them. I've been going back and forth with Mid-American representative on getting this set up and had some questions here and there about some things. And so I'm hoping that I hadn't confirmed if that's exactly when the date is, but early on when we were giving information to them back in Thanksgiving time, it was scheduled to start February 1st.
so at the end of the quarter, that would be March. Or are they gonna start it quarterly when it starts? They start,
That I'm not sure. I was anticipating anything they collected through probably the end of the quarter, March.
oh, okay, yeah,
Then we would receive in the next quarter.
quarter.
I guess I did not clarify that with them. That was just my assumption.
So 2 things I would point out. I mean, first of all, we don't, at least for now, we're not planning any expenses out of this fund that we're creating. Obviously, it's a new fund. What I would suggest as we do, so I mean, the purpose of the franchise fee is to kind of maintain and operate the right-of-ways, our streetways, and really the cost associated with that utility being in the right-of-ways. So my suggestion would be we apply that to streets. It's allowable use. We can use it in a lot of different ways, but that would be my suggestion. So as we get a better idea of the collections over this next year, that's how we'll address it in future fiscal years. So it's kind of our logic right now as we're stepping into this. Any thoughts on that?
Sounds good to me.
I'd rather see what it's turning into before.
The other thing I'd point out as we did this ordinance, the ordinance was very specific, and this was the example we received from Mid-American Energy, was only city accounts would be exempt from the franchise fee, and actually state law also says city accounts are exempt from the franchise fee. When we submitted the franchise to Mid-American Energy, their comment back to us was, most cities exempt schools. Do you want to exempt schools? Well, no, the ordinance says only cities. So we had conversations with legal counsel, actually had a conversation with Mayor Jensen. And that's the way our ordinance was set up. So that's the way we're proceeding at this point. Now, there's really 4 different categories that we can have different rates for, exempt from the franchise fee, and that'd be residential, non-residential, government, public schools, and city accounts. So I guess there's 5 there. So that's at least how we proceed. So there may be some comments that get made because of that change. But for just a reminder for anyone watching this, for the ratepayers, that receive Mid-American Energy today, they're paying a local option sales tax, and that is a 1% sales tax. This is a franchise fee, it's 1%. So for the end user, they're not going to see a change. So I just wanted to point that out. And I guess if there's any comments or concerns about how we're proceeding, we can look at making an amendment to the ordinance if the council would like to proceed that way.
Okay.
One other quick comment on the electric franchise for reporting purposes. This is like the hotel motel where it's going to be reported with the general fund stuff because that's the way the code is written. But we will track it separately so we make sure it's being spent for the purpose
For
that
those
we're
purposes.
collecting it for. Okay, so that's the electric franchise fee. The next area, I don't have my list here. Tab P. Okay, I don't have summary sheets for, I think, the rest of these areas, so I can just talk about what the tabs are. So tab P is what we call our special revenue fund. The reason we're collecting the revenue is for a special purpose. So we can only spend it for those special purposes of why we're collecting it. So the first one is the employee benefit. We're collecting, this is tax dollars, and then we're collecting that to cover employee costs. So state code says we have to have a separate fund set up where the money is deposited, and then from there, you can distribute it out to where your eligible costs are incurred or paid from. So we have this set up where the money is then transferred to the general fund and the road use tax fund to cover employee costs. And the other area in here of special revenue is the emergency special revenue. That's a 27-cent levy that cities could levy for additional monies to help cover general fund expenses. Currently, the city of Carroll is not collecting anything for the emergency levy. Tab Q is local option sales tax. This is probably best explained by the summary sheet that we put together that was in your inside cover, but you got an updated one with the agenda that was sent out yesterday with a couple changes that we talked about earlier tonight. And I know we've talked quite a bit about the local option sales tax over the last couple months, you know, where we thought the revenue was going and some of the expenses. So what is included in here, this is where your tax relief comes into play. Mayor Johnson. This is another fund that is set up that state code says it's a special revenue fund. You have to track it separately. The collections that we receive go into this fund, and then you can spend it out for the purposes of why you set up the collections to begin with. So the one purpose is the 25% tax relief. We do a transfer out of this into the debt service fund to cover some principal and interest payments. And that's where we show our form of tax relief. The remainder monies that is collected can be spent for any legal purpose that council wants to spend it. So there's been a number of things over the years. Fiscal 21, I will point out there's been a couple changes from maybe what we had budgeted. One is, this is where we had allocated, if council wants to go forward with the railroad crossing study, we would suggest maybe looking at using local option sales tax funds to pay for that. Anything else? The other items, they were budgeted items. When we talked about the fiscal 21 budget. Other than
Timberline.
Timberline sidewalk for the design, that is a change that we talked about earlier, is to cover those design services, is taking it out of local option sales tax, meaning we would make a transfer out of the fund into this capital project streets fund. And I believe we have also included in here increasing the amount going to the streets rehab projects. Typically, we had been budgeting for about 500,000 coming out of local option sales tax to go to street projects. And that's what we did budget for fiscal 21. Now we're suggesting for some projects that are coming out that we increase the fiscal 21 to 650,000, and then in fiscal 22, 625,000. Continuing 150,000 for trails, and that would be a transfer out of here into the capital projects fund for the, what we call the CP Parks and Rec area. And the rec center building project, we talked about, we had originally put, your first sheet came out with $1 million shown in fiscal 23. Now this new allocation shows that we would spread that out over a 3-year period to get the project going until you have some funding available for some design services. I'll touch briefly on the Miracle Field because I'm not exactly sure where that project is going right now, but I know a while ago there had been talk about council putting some money towards the project out at Miracle Field. This is showing that if you wanted to put 50,000, it's a placeholder in this accounting here, but it's not actually incorporated into our budget.
Into the budget, yeah.
We do have a meeting next week with Tiggis's. I think we'll have a better idea at that point on kind of where they're headed and some of the improvements they're looking to do for the Miracle Field.
So you can see at the end of fiscal 22, we're projecting just a little over 500,000 in the fund of the local option sales tax. And then you can see as time goes on, our projections, where we think it might be heading over the next 2 or 3 years. We know a lot can happen in 2 or 3 years. So this just gives you an idea for some planning purposes stuff too. Does anybody have any questions about local option sales tax?
We get the true up check at the end of the year, yeah.
We get the true up check in November. So it is incorporated into our
That is in here.
re-estimated fiscal 21 number, that 1.9.
Kind of surprised us this year and came in better than we anticipated.
Yes.
Amazon pays taxes now, or collecting them.
So that's local option sales tax. The next tab for tab R is some more special revenue projects, or excuse me, funds, or what we call our urban renewal areas. This is where we account for our traffic tip collections. We have 3 areas, the downtown, Ashwood Business Park, and Westfield. The downtown area has been helping fund the streetscape projects is the main thing that's going on in that area. Ashwood is we're collecting to repay some debt that we had outstanding a few years ago. And the Westfield, that one's new this year in that it came out of hibernation. We did have it in place a few years ago, but at the time we had finished out the projects that were going on, but now it's being revitalized again. And this next year, we're planning to collect some money to cover some expenses that had occurred in that area to repay the city. The bulk of the money that's going to be collected in there, roughly about 150,000, will go to the streets. 144,000, excuse me, will go to, not the streets, will go to the road use tax fund. And then a smaller amount of just over $4,600 will come back into the general fund to pay for some expenses that were related to getting the funds set up again. Some legal fees and amending the urban renewal plan. Any questions on our urban renewal funds?
Delinquent taxes, 10,962.
Yes, so in years past, I had not really accounted for delinquent taxes because most of the times people paid on time and we really didn't have a big thing. Well, with COVID and the change in the state law, they allowed you to push off and not pay your March taxes right away, and that actually spilled into the summer months. I can't remember for sure exactly when they kind of stopped that, but a lot of people just forgot and was like, oh, I don't have to pay the March, and they just forgot about it. So when they went to pay their September, the treasurer's office was catching them, hey, you haven't paid September, or you haven't paid last March. And so in the system, it shows as delinquent taxes that just weren't paid back in March when they should have been paid. So I'm tracking this stuff separately for some of those. It really relates to money that should have been paid in a different fiscal year than the current fiscal year. Yeah, and it's been quite a thousands, because we're seeing that too in the general fund with the collection for the 810 and the employee benefit. You know, we're seeing thousands come in for all those funds or all those different levies. Any other questions with the urban renewal areas? The next tab that we have not gone through is tab T. Well, I guess we did kind of talk about this already with the debt discussion we had early on at the first session. If there's any other questions with tab T, it's the debt service fund. It's where we track our principal and interest payment. State code says we have to have a separate fund set up for the collection of the property taxes and the revenue that you're bringing in to pay for your principal and interest. And then these are the current outstanding debt issuances and the amounts that we pay each year.
Say a different fund. You're actually talking about a different fund in the bank,
Well,
or just in our books?
just in our books,
And
yes. Tab U is our capital projects fund. We've talked about a number of these already. The ones that we really haven't talked much about, I will highlight real quickly. The first one on page 189 is for the equipment purchases. This fund doesn't always get utilized, and only gets utilized when there's a big purchase. So this is where we had accounted for the most recent purchase of our fire truck. And there's just a little bit of money that are being expended in fiscal 21 to use up the remaining of the debt proceeds. So that's the capital projects, or that's the equipment purchases. The airport capital projects, this is where we account for the projects going on at the airport. We're not anticipating, or we're not budgeting for projects in fiscal 22. What's shown in fiscal 21 is to finish up the current projects that they're completing right now. We've talked about streets, we've talked about corridor commerce, we've talked about parks and recreation, we've talked about street maintenance already. The library city hall remodels, we are finishing up, actually I believe all the expenditures have been made for that project right now. Now it's just a matter of working with the CAT grant to close out that paperwork. And the final capital project fund that we have is the housing. This is the CDBG grant that was awarded to the city, and we're working with Region 12 on that. So there is the bulk of it is the federal CDBG grant money, and then there was a little bit of a city match that goes along with this. So that's accounting for that stuff. Are there any questions about the capital project funds? I guess any of them in general, that even if we didn't talk about it tonight. And the final area that we have not talked about would be the very last tab, tab Z, is for how we account for our medical insurance internal service fund. So this acts as its own fund to help account for what is the expense and the exposure for our health insurance. We charge all the departments based upon the number of employees in those departments a cost to provide health insurance to those employees. And then in turn, the city buys a high deductible plan that we buy down and partially self-fund the co-pays, the drawing a blank on the word, co-insurance and deductibles. And then if you have monies left over that you didn't have to pay for some of those because it just wasn't utilized through the partial self-funding, you accumulate a balance and to help with any future increases that may come along with the health insurance plan.
Well, where are we keeping account of from the loss of the property insurance?
That's what I was gonna ask you.
The,
Tort liability.
no, the ICAP,
Our
From the-
property insurance, our.
property insurance.
Or the tort.
That's under the tort liability thing? Okay.
And I know I sound like a broken record, but with the medical insurance, this really has worked very well for the city. We've looked a little bit at going self-funded. I know Debbie Dean just looks at it every year, just has never kind of made it cost-benefit analysis to do that. So we remain on the partial self-funded, but that's really worked very well. We're able to have a very high deductible plan. You know, we again buy it down. What I will say is when I look at my peer cities, our peer cities, and I talk to my colleagues, just what they pay for health insurance is really, really competitive. We're really low. I would say we're probably the lowest out there. And so it's one of those things, I think long term, this is going to be an area that we really have to watch. We do watch because we're going to see some rate increases. We've just been very fortunate. And, you know, we're estimating at the end of fiscal year 22 to have a $977,000 balance in there. And that serves two purposes. I mean, first of all, if we had a catastrophic year and everyone submits claims, you know, we have funds set aside to pay those claims, you know, the portion that we self-fund. But then it also has funds that allow us to really buy down the rate. So we're not taking a hit in 1 year from the city budget standpoint. So that's really worked very well. There may be a question at some point of if we see that account continue to grow, of do we look at changing rates and lowering them? But I'm a fan of keep the rates where they're at because everyone knows health insurance is getting more expensive. It's not getting cheaper. And you don't want a situation where all of a sudden, well, okay, we're going to lower the rates and next year we hit a catastrophic year and now we're really trying to catch up. So there's some other things we could do where you actually maybe have a premium holiday where you end up saying, okay, either half a month or a full month, we're not even going to charge a premium, you know, so neither our employees would pay nor would the city pay that particular month. So then you're able to kind of buy down that rate a little bit. It's in essence, it's a lowering of the premium without lowering the premium. So we continue to watch that. I'm not suggesting we do that at this point, but you know, if we get over 1 million, it's probably the point where we say, okay, we need to stop that from growing. But we're in a really good position. But it's one of those areas we really have to watch.
When does Debbie come back? When does our contract come up again? Is that April?
Usually she'll get some renewal information in April. We start
Okay.
working with her then, and she's usually coming before council in May for
That's-
July
okay.
1
Yeah.
effective date.
Okay.
And we have included, because obviously we don't know what the rates are gonna do in July 1, so we did include and worked into these numbers roughly a 15% increase on the Wellmark, the premium side of things, and then also a slight increase from the employee share as well. So we try to account for some of that. That's just not assuming that there's not gonna be anything and then you do get something. So you assume that you're probably gonna see some type of an increase, and then if it's not as high as the 15%, then you can adjust going forward.
When you say the employee share, are you saying that they're going to use it more and therefore, or are you talking about raising?
The amount that they put, the employee has to pay a percentage of this stuff, So that percentage that they, or the percentage stays the same, but the dollar amount that they would pay.
Comes out of their paycheck.
Coming out of their
Paycheck.
Coming out of their paycheck, yeah, that one. Not necessarily, are you talking about the portion that the city pays to cover the
No, I'm talking
buy-down?
about the portion that employee pays. It's coming-
Reduces
It's
their
staying the
income.
same, it's keeping the same, they're not paying extra, they're just,
No, we have included a little bit
okay.
of an increase there.
And every year we do, but Laura, I don't think we've had a rate increase since I've been here.
I know it's been a number of years, yeah.
And so we've really been able to
Hoping
hold
it
those
doesn't
rates.
happen.
Say that again?
You're guessing, you're estimating that and hoping it doesn't happen.
You're hoping,
Mhm.
Yeah,
but it seems like, that year's gonna come.
it absolutely
What
is.
is it, last year, I think, what was it, like 6% it went up? 5 or 6%? It wasn't very
It wasn't
much.
very much.
The premium wasn't much,
Oh.
no, and we were then
Maybe even
able
like
to
4% or something.
keep the,
I know it's not the same, and yours is completely different
Mhm.
than my business, but I just found out today that there is no increase in mine. It's a well-marked type plan, so be encouraging maybe. You
yeah,
never know, but
right.
Mhm.
I know there's a bunch of different factors that plays into each plan on how they rate and what.
this was the first year it was not, that didn't increase at all. So
Nice.
for 4 or 5 years, so.
I haven't seen a report recently, but I know a few months ago, we did receive a report from Deputy Dean, and our trend was running a little bit more than the year prior. So I would expect we'd see some type of increase, but, unfortunately, with health insurance, you just don't know what it is till you get it. There's just no clue. Now, if we were totally self-funded, when I was on the county side, we had great reports. And I could tell you every day of the week where we were, how we were trending. And it's the difference when you're self-funded, you're really the insurance company. So,
What, did this county buy a catastrophic policy then, or what?
so yes, that's exactly what we did, was we had both a policy at the individual level. And if I recall right, I think it was $50,000. So anyone that had a claim over $50,000, we had a reinsurance plan to cover them. And then we had a pool-wide plan. I want to say that was like $750,000. So if our pool hit that, the entire employee group hit that, then they paid it. And we never hit that one. But the individual one, there would be 3 or 4 every year that would hit that, and that's why you buy that catastrophic plan.
We've kind of had conversations about it just because I knew that we were talking about this when the budget, and
Yep.
Mike had told me about some of that stuff too, that you buy those catastrophic reinsurance just in case there goes over, it kind of keeps your levels a little lower.
And then, you hit those, your reinsurance is going to go up.
Yeah.
And so you pay for it one way or another. But, one thing, and I think we look at it, my pause is when we made the move when I was up at the county, when we went from fully insured to self-insured, I was always told you always want at least a pool of 100 policies. And the county, I think we had like 106 policies. And I'm not sure, Laura, we probably have 40-ish, I
We're
would
too low
guess.
here, or
Yeah.
low.
Maybe 50, like low 50s.
Low 50s. So, we're on the lower end. But now Debbie Dean says she has some that are way lower than that. So we look at it every year, and we make the judgment on what's the best route for the city to go.
Is it possible for 2 cities to go together and head
There are pools.
pools like that?
And again, the experience we had at the county, one of the issues, at least in the pool arrangement we had, was there was really rates and, the percentage changed. Every member of the pool had a different rate and they had a different percentage that would be applied to them. But it was like, okay, the low end, you could maybe get a -2. On the high end, you got 25% increase. Well, what happened to the county was we had an issue where it was 17, 34, 34, 17% increases over a 4-year period. So we had these huge claims. We paid for it. Now our rate was really high. Then we went into the cycle where our rates we should have had, the year we left the pool, we should have had like a 40% decrease in our rate. Well, because the pool arrangement, they basically said, nope, the lowest you could have was a 5% increase. Well, so then we're looking at all this money in the table. I was like, well, that was the year we made the change. We kept our rates actually flat that year. We knew we were going to gain this 40% increase, and that's how we built our reserve. In year one, we put $400,000 in reserve. But it was a hard swallow for the county because there was a lot of risk. Now the nice thing was when you go self-funded, if you just think, Dr. Jensen would know this, when you go see the doctor, the insurance company doesn't pay out, or your self-funding doesn't pay out probably for 30 to 60 days. And so we had this really nice period where we started January 1. We didn't pay any of our income out until February. So we had premiums that came in January 1. So that helped a little bit. On the backside, if you ever leave self-funding because it's disastrous, you're paying claims for 6 months and you're paying premiums out to your fully insured policy. The only claims we received was from pharmacy, because pharmacy are, time of sale, they're within a
They're
week.
consistent pretty much daily.
So but the good thing that we would be in a position is if we ever went to fully insured or fully self-funded, is we have the reserve day one. And so that, we have, I don't know what the exact number is today we have in there, but, we're over $750,000 sitting there plus.
So I thought it was like 800 when you and I looked at it a couple months ago.
I'd rather be conservative, but we're in a good position. If we ever did make that change, we could do it. But there's risks. There's risks staying where we're at because we can't control what our rate would be. There's risks going, but it's one of those areas that what do you know, Laura? What do we charge for? What is our family annual cost for our family plan?
You mean like that includes
The COBRA rate, yep.
I think it's around 12 to 13,000.
Yeah. So
About a little over $1,000 a month.
So we're $12,000 for a plan that essentially costs our employees $500 deductible, $1,000 maximum out of pocket. Per individual, family is $1,000 deductible, $2,000 out of pocket. Other cities in Iowa are paying $18,000 to $24,000 for that same plan design. So we are really in a great position with what our premiums are right now, but there will be a year that it'll be 17, 34, 34, 17, and it's going to be tough. We can buy down the rates, but if you buy down the rate in 1 year, that's just that much more you got to catch up the next year. So it's one of those, we're just in a golden spot right now.
So insurance companies are only allowed to make a certain amount of money, right?
That's my understanding, yes.
Yeah, and if they make too much money, they have to kick that back to their customers, right? Has that ever happened to the city? Never. Okay. Because it's happened before with my policy. And I don't know if it's city policy, could be different.
No, I have not seen.
Never seen that happen. They probably get their books right, so it doesn't occur.
Party at Jerry's.
Their own. Well, I received a check twice.
Did you? Oh.
Yeah. I said, well, wait a minute, they politely said that they
Overcharged you?
made, yeah, it's part of Obamacare.
Yeah.
And they made more than they were allowed to, so they credit you back.
credit you back.
So
So they actually send you a check rather than
they did the
Just
first
credit the
time. I don't
account.
think they figured out that they could just,
credit the account.
so it was early on.
Can I switch our gears a little bit back to that tort liability page on 128, please? There's quite a bit of media coverage in Scuttle in December when the county's premiums went up $28,700. And I was just taking a look at this. It appears you're anticipating about $21,000, $20,900 increase for our year over year. Going from 271,000 budgeted currently to 292. Right now we're tracking 258.
That was that Duracho
Derecho
thing.
That's what I was
yeah.
wondering. Yeah. So that $20,000 is 20.
And actually, it's really more than that because we started with the re-estimate, because we don't know what our rate is today. So you start with your re-estimate of the 258,000, because that's what our actual costs were. And then now the one thing is this includes work comp.
Yes.
So it's not just ICAP.
So what I did when I figured out the budgeted number for fiscal '21, I looked at the amount of premium that we paid to ICAP in fiscal '21, which included the credit. I took that credit out, so then the subtotal there without the credit, I took that total and increased it by 5%. So we took away the credit and then I increased it by 5% because they always rate you on your property and the liability. Liability is based upon some formula they run through and stuff with like your expenses, your budgeted expenses. Typically budgeted expenses go up slightly every year, so anticipating an increase there. Plus they automatically increase your building your contents and your building structure values every year. It's usually somewhat minimal, like a 3% increase, just so that, because they know cost of construction and stuff is going up every year, so that you don't get too far out of the market. They automatically throw that in there, and then you can, yes, probably say, no, okay, we might be low here, or we need to add another building here, whatever the case may be. So that's where I'm hoping with that 5% increase, we're covering some of that stuff that's already automatically going to get increased. And then I take a look at worker comp, what we paid the prior year, increase that by 5% because wages typically go up every year as well. I think those are the main areas.
So your estimate here doesn't include any increase for derecho increases from ICAP then?
That's part of the property and liability insurance. So,
Okay.
So
I understand that, but is that
that would be in
in
this
that
line.
292? It's included in there.
yes,
And you did budget something for that foreseeable increase.
yes.
And I think the big change again to reiterate is we've annually received a credit from ICAP.
Right,
So here's
right.
your premium, and they come forward and say, okay, you're gonna get this credit, and you don't want to recall what that amount
It
was.
was somewhere between $14,000 and $15,000 last year.
And they've said no one's getting credits this year.
Right.
So
That's what the
that was
county-
the first impact we've taken.
That's what the
So that's
county
it.
was upset about. That's what got reported on the radio, yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we had accounted for it here.
Right.
Now, certainly, I think I don't think we formally have asked one since I've been here. We've been with ICAP for a very long time. And I think overall, we've been very satisfied with ICAP. I do think there are times that, they maybe are not always the best customer service. And I've heard that from some of my peers in the sense of just how they work with some of the claims that come through. But, they have an interest of insuring the city. I mean, they're not really an insurance company. It's a cooperative group of municipalities in Iowa that self-fund property casualty. But, there are other options, but I'm not sure we'd fit into that. If I understand right, it was before I was here. We had another firm come through. There's really only 2 firms that insure cities in Iowa. And I can't recall their name on the site. EMC, yes, thank you. What I recall is that when they came in last time, they would not insure the city because one of our dam structures that is in the golf course. And they said, because of that, we're not going to insure the city. Is that?
I don't recall the reason, but yeah, I know we've talked with, we work with,
Did you say dam structure?
Yes. So we have a dam structure up in the golf course that protects some, it retains water.
Retains the water, yeah.
If there was a high water event. And it really, what I understood is because of that structure, they would not insure the
Seems
city.
like a small issue.
Say that again.
Seems like a small issue for a whole
Well,
city.
It's just a liability they didn't want to take on.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
All right, well, thanks. I'm glad that we've got it.
but
covered.
certainly if the council wants us to, we could go back and ask for a formal bid or see if they would insure us again. But again, I think ICAP has served us well. I don't have any huge complaints with them.
I think they treated us very well with some of the last litigation stuff. They were able to get that all ironed out.
Absolutely. I mean, I
You
think
know,
with
they did a pretty good job.
I think with the issues we've had, and we've had some bigger claims with ICAP recently.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've served us very well.
the last little bit of area that we really haven't touched upon that I would like to bring your attention to is under tab C. So the first few pages is the fiscal 21 and fiscal 22 capital requests for all the departments. And every department touched base on this when they went through each of their presentations. So that's like the first 5 pages. Then after that is what we call our capital improvement, our 5-year CIP. This is the projects that we take a look at and look forward 5 years. What do we know is coming up? What's on the horizon? Do you have funding sources tied to them or not? So the next one, so it starts on page 27. The next 5 pages is what we call the CIP. It is basically the same information, recategorized. Like the first 2 pages, I like the first 2 pages and not report the best out of all of them. Because what it does is it takes a look at the projects that have been identified, and then it ties the funding source if we've got a funding source on how to pay for those. Then once you get to the next page, or the page 29, just recategorizes it and shows these are just the projects only by the total expenditure. And then on page 30, it's breaking it down by the funding sources. If you wanted to take a look at, what is local option sales tax funding or projected to fund over the next 5 years? So it's got a list of the projects and then just that portion of the expense that's covered by that particular funding source. So it would be misleading to look at, for instance, under hotel motel tax, trails expansion, 100,000. Well, that project could also be listed under another funding source if there was multiple funding sources for that particular project. So that's why but if you wanted to see it broken down that way, that's an option with this program. But starting on 27, this is where it takes each of the projects and then ties the funding source and it's all right there. So you can see if multiple funding sources are funded. So the items in the column for fiscal 22 have been incorporated into the preliminary budget that we've discussed over these last 3 nights. And then 23 on out are items that we would take a look at, and then any other feedback that council would want us to take a look at going forward. And if there's a funding source, so the golf course, so for instance, under golf course, the golf cart shed is a project that we're looking at, a few years out, and it says undetermined. We don't have a funding source tied to it at this point.
So you're gonna add the rec center in there to the lost,
Yes, we can.
so that's updated, like what you had outlined here. And then it looks like in the Timberline project, and then the railroad crossing study of that, like, on page 30. Is that where you would add that in there?
The September 9, we will have to,
Yeah, we don't have a cost estimate right now on that, so
Oh,
it's tough
okay.
to add it.
So once you get that, then you can
and
put,
then we can add that going forward.
gotcha, okay.
In future years.
One change I would point out on page 31, at least with the undetermined, there's two projects, golf course shed, which we haven't determined a funding source, but then the Adams Street reconstruction, that will change based on the discussion we had earlier in our budget workshops to
Right,
GO bond.
To the GO bond.
So that'll be a change. And then, yeah, we can add the rec center, and that's an easy one.
And so that reflects what we just discussed. Yeah, thank you. Did you have anything else, Laura? Because I was the other thing that we had there at the bottom was does anybody have any questions about the review of the geo bonding? Did everybody get that from, I think that was pretty well explained the first night, but just in case anybody else had any other questions about that.
So we've, I think, covered everything in the budget proposal. This is the opportunity now, if there's other questions that council has, other changes they would like to see made, this is the time to discuss that.
I'll throw one thing out here, and it's a given that I think all of us are probably aware to, but I got this very nice handwritten letter from a constituent where she outlined the fact that she's a senior on a fixed income, and it's important to her that we maintain her taxes low.
Mm-hmm.
We all have those little contacts here and there from our seniors who we care deeply about. And I guess I just wanted to bring it back so we all have that at the top of our mind as we look at the budget. And I just wanted to share that.
I bend Mike's ear when this comes. He's probably tired of me. It's keeping that number low. We still have to struggle to get the services there, and keeping the rehab stuff going. But I think he's tired of me harping on him. But
No, it's good to do that.
no, I mean that jokingly, but yeah, I try to just hammer that point every time.
And I think
And I-
100% agree with the philosophy that, fiscally, we gotta live within our means. And I think
Mhm.
we've done that historically before I've been here, and, we continue to do that. I think it's also a balancing act that what we really also want to recognize is keeping everything zero is not sustainable over the long term. This budget from a property tax collection is about 1.6% increase. I think that's pretty reflective of what most families in Carroll are kind of experiencing in their own costs. But we have different costs, and so we see a lot of construction costs. We know that is increasing. Can be as much as 5% generally annually, and so long term, it's one of those things that if we don't see even a modest increase, it's eventually going to catch up to you, and then you're going to see those large increases. So I think it's really a balancing act trying to maintain the low property taxes. We always look at our peers and how we compare to our peers, but then we also have to kind of have that budget reality of what do we need to continue to operate. And I think this was a really, as I said early when I started this budget sessions. This was a difficult budget. I mean, professionally, I've been responsible for 9 budget presentations, either at a previous employer or here. This by far was kind of the more difficult one, where there just was a lot of things that we frankly wanted to fund. We just could not fund this year. Those will be things we'll have to look at next year. But we staff did a really good job of kind of identifying those things that we need to cut, that we could cut. And I think also to maintain the level of services people in Carroll expect us to have. They want to see the snow get picked up in downtown and hauled out of downtown. They don't want to see big piles all winter. Well, I will tell you, there are communities that a third of their parking in the winter's gone because of piles of snow. We don't do that in Carroll. So those are the type of things that we wanted to continue. I mean, these even minor stuff of mosquito control. I mean, we talked about that as a possible cut, but again, I think as we weigh, no one wants to have mosquito control taken out. So, this budget really reflected trying to keep those services that people expect in Carroll, but also recognize that people live on fixed incomes, are going through challenges with COVID-19. And so I think this was that balancing act to kind of maintain the services people have, but also do it in a way that fiscally, again, only increased our property tax asking by 1.6%. Now that affects different property taxpayers differently, where residential property taxpayers will see about a 3%, commercials, I think 0.25% increase. That's just the way the formula works. But the overall property tax asking is fairly modest in my opinion.
Well, in our initial discussions, I think we were looking at maybe a 10 or 11 cent increase. And we're at about 5%, 6 cent increase.
Yeah.
So he was able to get it in a lot better order for our citizens than what we were originally looking at projections. So, yeah.
This is the discussion I'd hoped for. I managed to vent the needs of the elderly on fixed income, and yet I know we had this early on, but I think it's really important it's driven home to the people. Before this budget makes it to this council, a lot of the really heavy lifting has been done by staff to make sure that we have a responsible budget. And that is a long-standing hallmark of Carroll. Carroll has always been very conservative, very careful with the taxpayers' dollars. So thank you for continuing that tradition. And
just as an aside, I'm sitting here thinking about it. One of the things that I think really hit me home on how well Mike and the staff does with this is looking at just the project between the library and this, and keeping that at that budget level at the 6.8 million or under. We kept it. They were able to do that. A lot of help from the Library Foundation with fundraising and things like that. That helped a lot, but they were able to keep those expenses down and really harped on it. So
We were under 6.8 million.
So
we delivered on that. And
there was a lot of discussion about that. Yeah. But the responsibility that they took upon themselves to do that to that project and the citizens, I think that's very commending.
So I'm going to reiterate a point that Laura said. This is obviously, as the budget document staff is given to council, are there priorities? Are there things that we missed that you want in this budget that are not in now? Are there things in this budget that you don't want in here? Because, the process and Laura will go through some of the dates that we'll be looking for, but it's a lot easier to make the change now than it is as we go through the budget hearing process. So we really, if there are things that are missing in here, please, we want to hear that, because this is obviously can be an imperfect document. So we'd like that feedback.
What about the other way? Is there too much in there that you're wasting too much time for us to present us? Do you feel that, or do you feel it's okay on your end?
Say that again now.
Is there too much in here that we don't need, that you're wasting a lot of time on to present to us? Just
Like the
opposite of what
budget
you're
book
thinking?
itself?
Yeah.
I honestly.
Is staff fine with doing it the way it is?
I think there are some tweaks we're going to make next year. And certainly we're always looking for feedback on what council finds valuable or invaluable. We'll look at some of the changes, because I think even as we were going through this tonight, even having one more past fiscal year, we have
I think that
current and
adding,
that's an easy change, I think, for us to make to that and adds value. So we'll look at making that change. There are some things that I'm already toying with the budget memo that will make changes going forward. In fact, I've already rewrote half the budget memo for this fiscal year's budget, just to be ready for next, because it's better to kind of plot it out now than when you're in the heat of it. I think the financial software, which we hit on tonight, That may not change next year's budget book, but I think even the following one, I think that'll make some changes to reporting, because I think there are reports I want to be able to provide council. There's information I really want, but it's too time consuming with our current financial software to do it. I'd probably spend a week to do every month, where the new software I think will allow us to do it quickly. So I guess my question is there, when I talk about adding stuff versus taking stuff out of the budget, I'm really looking for is there a project or an expense that you want us to do or don't want us to do? Because this is your policy document. This really sets the direction for the council. So if we're missing something, we want to hear it.
Okay, before you answer that, I'll just give you a quick review of where we're at with the timeline. So we do have scheduled to have one more council work session if it's needed for next Wednesday, February 3rd. And then the next council meeting on February 8th is really when we need to start that process of setting our public hearing for the maximum levy, that new public hearing that we get to do. So we'll set the public hearing at the next council meeting on the 8th. So we really need to identify, this is where we want the levy to be. And
at that point, just to interject here, that point sets the levy. We can lower the levy, but at that point, we cannot increase the levy. You're locked into that as the maximum levy. So that's a kind of a critical point is.
When is that again?
the February 8th council meeting. So it's your next council meeting.
So there, again, you can take stuff out, and as you go through the public hearing process, that typically is what happens, is you take stuff out. But you can't say all of a sudden, we want to add a sidewalk somewhere that's $200,000, it's gonna come out of the general fund. You can't do that at that point.
Is February 8th when you set the hearing? So it'd be in 2 weeks, or is February 8th the actual hearing?
That's when we set the hearing. The
So
actual hearing will be 2 weeks later, but when you set the hearing, that's when you set
Sorry to
the
interrupt, that's
maximum.
what I thought. I
No,
just don't
that's
want to
fine,
report it wrong, thanks.
So there's that process, and then once we get through that, then we will set the hearing for the actual budget document. At the point that you set the hearing for the budget document, you set your limit, your upper limit of the expenditures.
You can always remove stuff, just can't add any more at that point.
At that point, yes, that's correct. Unless you want to start the process over, but we won't have time for that. So this is kind of the time now to hash out some of this stuff.
I would, if there's projects you want to add, just remember, it's gonna raise that levy rate that we've already just raised by basically 5-6 cents. So you want to just be careful.
I don't have anything else to add.
To give you a little feedback on that person that was talking to you, I don't know if it's because of all the things we have done in this town with the streets and library, city hall and things like that. This last year, I've had more people tell me that they're really satisfied with what's going on in our town, especially the two big streets, the Grant Road and what's the other one? Northwest Street. If they're comparing us to other towns, I don't know why, but I got a lot of feedback this year that they're kind of happy with a lot of the stuff that we're doing. And to be able to do it with not much of a tax increase, that's pretty impressive that, the public feels.
I think the public they pay a lot more attention than what you think.
Well, I think getting this library city hall project done under budget was an eye opener, with all the negative stuff that was out there.
Right.
And we fulfilled it. Now they're starting to believe that, things are okay.
Well, and I think I've heard the same thing, especially I hear streets,
Yeah.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
But they want to see tangible evidence of how their tax dollars are being spent. And one thing, when Clay said, could you add something, I just always figure it up myself. And I'm not asking you to add this, but Brad usually does mention when he does his budget review, the percentile of his total budget that goes to personnel, and how he's, the number of employees or the people in his department is so reasonable compared to other cities. And I just think people who think we spend too much or not wisely, I think they need to understand. I remember Brad said, my personnel budget is 89% of my total budget. And we focus on training and we focus on equipment. And I think those are the basics. And I think it's important somehow to get that out, because when people talk to me about you're spending too much, that they need, I always tell them, about 85 to 90% of each department's budget goes to personnel, and they are doing a lot of work. So I don't know. I think that's kind of important. I don't know if it should be, tabulated, but anyway, I think people need to know.
Well, and to that point, trust is earned, and
Yeah.
for sure being able to show that the rec center came in, or pardon me, not the rec center, too many new things on the mind. The library, city hall came in under budget. That's a huge step in the right direction of proving that we can be trusted. So things are getting better.
I guess one question I've got for project-wise, we've been addressed a couple times as council about the lighting at Northeast Park. And are we looking at trying to cover that through the improvements that we're doing up there with Miracle Field and such?
Yep.
Okay. It's kind of what I thought, but I just want to make sure that was out there, because I know there's interest in that, and I know there's been those that approach us and like nothing's going on, so.
I keep that in the back of my mind, Mike, because I think if that trails project goes through there, that'd probably be even a bigger consideration.
I agree.
Yeah, I sit and think about that too at times, that if we're gonna have something like that out there, especially with that kind of exercise trail, it wouldn't behoove us to light that a little better too. But I also had people that live on that, they don't want the lights flashing in their houses either. But I think there's a way we probably get a compromise out of that.
And
So-
I think if I'd refer to Brad, the chief, but I think the activity there has slowed down.
Really gone way down too.
I just want to hit one more thing as we're give you some more time to think about. Is there something else we're missing? Can you go to page 14? So we talked about the max levy, and I talked about the 1.6%. But one thing I think is really important to the public, and we talked about it the first night, with the change that happened with property taxes under Senate File 634. The public hearing notice we put out is going to say a 4.68% increase.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In reality, that excludes the debt service, and that is going down. And because of that, we're really only going to be increasing the total property tax asking by 1.67%. So I think that's really important as council. If you get calls and questions, how are you going up 4.68? My home family budget's not going up. I think the narrative really is, well, the legislature tells us how we have to do these public hearing notices. It's not a form we pick. And reality is, when you consider all the property tax collections we're doing, it's only going up that 1.67%. So I think it's really important to relay as you get questions from the public to keep that in mind.
And what was the name of that law?
Senate
File
File 634.
What was the name associated with it? It's like
Transparency.
transparency.
Oh,
and-
yeah.
It makes it less.
This makes
Yeah,
it less
it does.
This
transparent.
really needs to be addressed when our representatives come for the meeting.
I talk to Brian about it every time I see him, because it really went backwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing, and it's interesting that when I was up in Minnesota, we hated it. And I think cities and counties want to get rid of it. But if you really want transparency, a process they do up there is you go through a public hearing, and you actually would have to set your public hearing probably about 2 months earlier than what we do now, which kind of sucks. Actually, you really don't, because you had to submit your budget on December 15th. That started January 1st. So actually, our process would be fine, but you actually don't say your final levy till later. But anyhow, you set a preliminary levy in September, and November 15th, after the elections, conveniently, a property tax notice gets sent out to every owner saying, based on the preliminary budget that was set by school, county, city, this is what your property taxes could be if the preliminary budget's adopted as the final. And by the way, here are the public hearings each jurisdiction's holding, and you can show up at this date and time, and the meeting always had to be in the evening, and talk to your council. If you want transparency, that's the way you do it. Now, I think what frustrated cities, counties, and schools is that's a pretty big expense to send those notices out, and no one ever shows up. And I won't go into a long story, but I will tell you we had a controversial item. The boardroom's packed for my first hearing. We got the controversial item over a gravel permit that was gonna cost $100 a year and affect like 3 people, but there was 20 people there. Room cleared out, there's no audience left, and we talked about a $20 million budget that had way more impact on everyone than a $100 gravel permit. So if you want true transparency, though, that's the way you do it. The process the legislature set out is just completely flawed.
It kind of was a retrograde.
The weird.
Was so ill prepared. That's that Mike even had a conference call with Brian Baston and actually got a lot of the stuff that they really wanted to do to us out.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
Mike
yeah.
was kind of a forerunner and got
Actually,
a lot of it.
Like the afternoon, I had to fly out of Des Moines for vacation. I stopped at the legislature and actually met with a couple
Yeah.
of committee chairs and Brian. And they made some really good changes that, and I think some of it was coming, because I think a lot of cities were really pounding, this is a problem the way you have it set up. One of the things that technically this increase would require approval by 2/3 of the council. But everything we do, because we're a 6-member council, is already approved by a 2/3 majority. So there was some things that the legislature did, but this was a lot more palatable where they got. The public hearing notice is just kind of bizarre the way they do it.
This is something the League of Cities should be really working on for us.
They are.
They
They tried
yeah.
The
Yeah.
last time. They
Yeah.
I mean, they're a lot more powerful than each individual city would be.
They really did try on our behalf.
They tried,
They
and
were
like-
at their hearings on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were really down there, and it wasn't the only, and maybe it's just because I knew Mike was there, but it really didn't change until Mike went down there and talked with Brian Best, and that's when I really seemed to start saying, "Hey, this is an overreach of what we're
They
doing."
had the House version and the
Senate version.
and they were
Trying-
clashing.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a mess.
There is no property tax bill yet in the legislature, but it's something, obviously, I know the league is watching very closely. Proper taxation in general is a concern of the legislature this year. So there could be bills that come up yet. So we watch that.
One thing in the budget that I think just always is important to remind people of is how fortunate we are to have a volunteer fire department. I'm looking at page 83, it brought me up because you were talking about personnel expenses at the police level, but, personnel service, $109,000 for coverage for this entire city, plus other communities as well. It's just amazing to me, and we need to really appreciate the willingness of these volunteer firefighters that makes that possible for us. And then one other thing about this budget, I did kind of want to mention it. I think it was very important to bring out the nutrient reduction and copper compliance and the importance that that's coming up ahead, what's coming up, what we're looking at in the future. And that could be a problem, obviously, to fund that. I know it's I just looked at page 30 and that's what reminded me of it. That's just something I'm glad we brought out during this process when Randy talked about it, so that the public knows we have something unavoidable coming up here that's going to add some expenses for them in one way or another. Again, it's for their safety, I guess, but it's just something that it's important that people know about. So I'm happy to see that the budget's kept as low as it was. You did a good job, all of you. Thank you.
I'll throw one piddly one in and then I'll be done. And I really don't even want to change anything at this point, but we had talked some time ago about signs along the Sauk Rail Trail directing people to downtown. We now have that connector across the railroad track. Where did we leave off on that, on the signage?
I thought that the Sauk Rail people were gonna take care of that.
Are they?
That's
Okay.
what it,
Not the part probably through the town. That's
Yeah.
something we can continue to look at. I mean, we just finally got it completely finished.
Yeah.
So that's something that, we can look at.
probably not the in-town part, but I think they were gonna do signs along their part, yeah.
Well, no, we
RGD.
did.
Just that sign on the link going to
Yeah.
Whitney?
Yeah.
Whitney, is it Whitney?
I think it's Whitney.
Yeah.
Clay, RGD brought that up on our
Yeah,
retail coach thing.
And Jack and I have talked
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
that we want
That's
to
been
do
addressed
some of that.
as part of something that we need to change.
Something I've seen in other communities too is marking a trail. Someone would get stuck out there, get injured. What mile marker are you at? Well, I'm on the trail. Well, where at? That really is through the whole county. That's another area that really needs to be looked at.
EMS thing type, yeah.
I just remember a report from someone saying that you could ride the Sauk Rail Trail and you didn't know you went through Carroll if you didn't, if you didn't know you were in Carroll, you didn't maybe know you were going through sometimes, which I
Yeah.
find hard to believe, but
Isn't there some signage down there by the Houlihan access
Oh,
though?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I
all
thought there was some stuff
mileage.
down there, yeah.
to and from, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's well marked pretty well, but compared to other.
I, maybe, were you alluding to maybe just something down here on Carroll Street, right down by Denny's, that type of thing?
I absolutely think that could be incorporated in too, but I'm talking first, let's
Yeah.
make sure they know this way to the food and the services and
Oh, okay, yeah,
off the trail, and then from there, we could definitely direct them marginally to
yeah,
different places.
very good. Thank you. Anything else? Any other comments? If not, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and vote, please.
Base? Yes. Jerks?
Yes.
Fleshner?
Yes.
Haley?
Yes.
Cobb?
Yes.
Seaman?
Yes.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.